this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
You know how it's never really about where you're going, it's about who you're going with? The right people can turn any drive into a great memory. That's something Toyota really believes. They design vehicles around real life and real people, the ones who make plans happen and bring everyone together. Inside, everything's built with passengers in mind. Comfortable seating, smart layouts, and space that actually works so everyone can relax and enjoy the ride. There's room for the people, room for the stuff, and room for the moments that happen along the way. Because when people are the destination, your ride is important. Learn more at Toyota.com and find the vehicle that fits your people. Wasabi is purpose-built to free your business from skyrocketing storage costs and fees. Wasabi is the go-to provider for professional and collegiate sports teams around the world. Check out Wasabi's AI-enabled intelligent media storage, Wasabi Air, to the industry's only cloud storage service with triple protection against cyber criminals. Wasabi, driving innovation in data storage for up to 80% less than market competition. Try for free at wasabi.com. Wasabi Hot Cloud Storage, proud partner of iHeart Podcast Network.
Derek Brown is an NFL and fantasy football analyst at FantasyPros who's done work at places like FTN, DraftKings, and Fantasy Data. He's a dad, he's got more hair on his chin than the top of his head, and this isn't the first time he's been on Late Round Perspectives. These are his Late Round Perspectives. This episode is sponsored by DraftKings. It might feel like the fantasy football season just ended, but it's actually just getting started. DraftKings is your home for early best ball. No waiver wires, no roster management. It's the easiest way to get in on the action without the weekly grind. Go to DraftKings.com or download the DraftKings Daily Fantasy app and draft your early bird best ball lineup for a shot at a share of $1 million in prizes. Drafts stay open until the season kicks off, so now's the time to jump in. You draft it, we crown it. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. Connecticut, call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. 18 plus in most states. Restrictions apply. See terms at DraftKings.com. Sponsored by DraftKings. I realized that I haven't done really a show. You know, I usually do the late round show with Kitchen every Wednesday. I even said on my Tuesday show that I was going to do it solo this week. And then I got it all. I got my wires crossed and I realized that this is a week we were taking off because Kitchen was gone this week on vacation. So I haven't gotten any free agent takes out there. This is the first time. And I've gotten to the point where I just don't really fire off many takes on Twitter anymore and on social media very often anymore.
Yeah, I've pulled back a lot on social media too, just because I maybe it's getting old and getting cranky, JJ. I don't know, man. Maybe we're both getting to the same stage. I'm just not willing to fight with people when they don't come to the art. Like, it's not good faith and it's not right. Let's have a constructive conversation. It's like, you're an idiot, you're a clown, you're wrong, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, okay, whatever. I'm just going to present information. Cool.
My problem is that, like, I often will, like, on Twitter especially, I used to, like, throw out takes or stances on things, not to say definitively this is how I feel, but people will read it as definitively this is how you feel about something. And I don't want that concrete way of thinking to be out there immediately. I want to talk. So instead, I go to, one of the greatest blessings for me has been the Discord for late round fantasy football from that perspective. To be clear, everybody, one of my greatest blessings are my children and my wife and my family, not the late round Discord. So that people are very clear there.
I love how you have to caveat that or you're going to get cooked in the comments on YouTube exactly. and stuff like, oh, well,
exactly. I do love the late rounders out there and I love our Discord, but it's crazy. I love my kids more. It's nuts.
Wild, right?
But it's been nice to have that community where I can go in there and say, you know, like when Chris Rodriguez signed with Jacksonville, which we'll talk about in a minute, I'm sure. But when Chris Rodriguez signed with Jacksonville, I was able to fire off a take and then immediately kind of like I'll fire off the hot stuff in that Discord. People will know that it's not to be taken so seriously. And then a minute or two later, let it sit and then kind of dig into what the ramifications of this particular thing, is. You just can't do that on Twitter. I can't do it on social media anymore. So, I mean, maybe that's a promotion to join the Discord, perhaps, but regardless, like, it's just a different kind of beast than it used to be. Or it could just be like us getting older, audience, all that kind of stuff. It's just changing.
It could be, all those things can be true simultaneously. And I don't disagree at all. And that's where I think specifically when we get, talking about this rookie class later, where I'm really kind of torn on a lot of different players. And that, we were talking about pre-show and stuff, like ranking guys and stuff, where it's like, this is a class where I feel like if we're going to have the conversation of just tier-based stuff, where it's like, especially with the wide receivers, it comes down to pick your flavor. We get into a conversation of this version of the NFL versus like 10 years ago, the NFL, and how that all kind of sifts out to where it's like people will look at on paper rankings and they're like, you got this guy wide receiver 2 of the class. And it's like, yeah, but draft capital is also going to like factor into that, and landing spot and fit and all that kind of stuff. So it's like you get on social media and you're like, oh, well, you present early rankings or whatever, and people are like, oh my gosh, like, and they look at it as like this concrete thing, and you're like, no. It's these are fluid, like
work in progress.
Yeah.
Well, you brought this up, and this is like, again, so today's structure is we'll talk about free agency, just so you guys are aware listening, and then we'll get into the rookie class because D-Bro does awesome work with prospecting and stuff. And the prospect guide will launch on the 16th, which is Monday, but technically it'll be out as I do every year on Sunday night, Sunday evening. So if you guys have pre-ordered, I'll keep that pre-order price until Monday morning, but that will be out. So I'm basically done with the prospect guide. I haven't even done my rankings yet. That's the one piece that I'm just kind of like waiting until I see where the final projected draft capital is, all that kind of stuff. But the one thing that you brought up, and we're kind of going out of order. I'm not going to get into all the prospects yet. I just want to talk at a very high level from a process standpoint with the prospects. I've talked a lot this offseason about the 12 personnel shift, the heavy personnel usage that we're seeing across the league. The one thing that I'm kind of having a hard time reconciling in a way with prospect work is this idea that, like, when we're looking at college players, like running back, wide receiver, tight end, sure. But when we're looking at these guys, one of the key reasons that from a data perspective, we're going to look at market share data is because there's such a wide variety of collegiate offenses, right? In terms of what they do and how they're styled and all that kind of stuff, just because there's a sheer more number of teams, right? We just have an absurd number of college teams where these guys are coming from. And so one of the things that I've been thinking about with the NFL that kind of makes it, to your point, a little bit more difficult to rank right now is that landing spot, probably at least like short-term landing spot, because obviously things change in an instant in the NFL. But to me, there's actually becoming a more wide variety of NFL offenses than we've seen over the last, like if we were to look at this like 7 or 8 years ago, like, yes, the trend is shifting towards heavier personnel, more 12 personnel usage, 13 personnel. Yes, that's the trend. But if you get a slot guy who ends up finding a place where the head coach is locked in and, we know that the head coach will be there for the next year or two, or, 2 or 3 years, let's say, and they run a lot of 11, then all of a sudden you should probably like that wide receiver a little bit more, because as much as we don't want landing spot to dictate things, we know that, from the trajectory of these players and from a value standpoint in Dynasty, if they get off to a hot start, we want to gain that value, immediately with these guys. Is that something that you've kind of, is that all kind of like in your thought process with the ranking stuff and what you're referring to there?
Absolutely. And that's one thing that looking at this iteration of the NFL and it's all been out there, but we've all been talking about it, the shift to more heavy personnel and more 12 personnel. So 2 wide receiver sets, like, it really is. It's coloring the way that I look at a lot of these prospects, and honestly, like the short and long term fits for these guys too. Because, and I, we're going to talk about all of them in depth, but for me, it really drills down to landing spots and as well the profiles too, because these slot confined players, and not to get ahead of ourselves, but like Mekhi Lemon, where it's like, dude, I would have loved him a lot more if we would rewind this like 10 years ago and the NFL was living in 11 personnel at like 85, 90%, or the Rams like almost every single snap they're playing. Whereas the top end teams are even like last year. If you look at last year, the top 10 teams, 63 to 69% of 11 personnel. So this feels like the Josh Downs conversation where it's like, or the Jayden Reed conversation where it's like, dude, like if he lands on one of these teams, or even the top teams aren't even utilizing this at 70%. So like, can he change that math? Sure. But even if he changes that math, that's what, 70%? So is he still even a full 80 to 90% route per dropback player?
Yeah.
And if he's not, that's going to change the math of his fantasy value. It has to.
Yeah. And there's some guys, because, you know, again, we'll get into the individual prospects, like a Lemon we'll have a good discussion about. But there are some like pure slot guys, like Kevin Coleman, for instance, who's just like that's what he's going to do at the NFL level, you know, or like, you know, there's some smaller guys that we don't know exactly where they fit and how well they can win on the outside. And therefore we got to pay attention to not just the landing spot from the standpoint of like, yeah, this is a good offense with an opening at wide receiver, and therefore this player can step in and do something. We have to look at it from the standpoint of what scheme does this offense run? Like schematically, what does this look like for this player to fit in? Now, we've done that always. I'm just saying, I think that there's more of a closer eye to that kind of thing, because before, when you had this like widespread 11 personnel usage, you were able to have more wide receivers on the field, which allowed for that more natural opportunity, because a lot of guys can move inside out. If you're a perimeter guy, maybe a team wants to use you as a big slot, etc. But if there are now more limited spots for these wide receivers to go to, we have to be more specific as a result of that.
I don't disagree at all. And that's what it all comes back to. And really drilling it down to, we always go back to, and the trope is real, is volume is king. Well, that also comes back to snap volume and route volume. And if you're not on the field, I mean, it's the Dalton Kincaid conversation. If you're not on the field, you can't score fantasy points. You can't catch passes. Yeah. So when you're splitting hairs between all of these prospects, I mean, dude, that can make the huge difference between where you're at on a Denzel Boston versus somebody like Mekhi Lemon when it's all said and done, because you got to be on the field running routes to get targets and score points.
All right, we'll get to the prospect stuff. Let's talk free agency. I think this is one of the more fun free agency periods that we've had in a while. Yes. So the first one I want to talk about is Kenneth Walker. He goes to the Chiefs. I want to just ask you how good of a fit you think this is, and how high you think maybe you think he should go / where you think he might end up going when we're like, just put yourself in August for a second and think about how high people are going to draft Kenneth Walker now that he's with the Chiefs.
I mean, I just kind of like, and again, early before the NFL draft, like reworked my redraft and best ball rankings. I put him up at RB10. Like, I think he's an RB1. I think it's about probably where he's going to live, in that low end RB1 territory. And I think it's a really, really good fit for both what he does and what the Chiefs need out of him. I mean, if you look at the KC rushing offense, this rushing offense was horrible. Like, yes, do they look good as far as like rushing success rate and what have you from last year? Those are all fine, because the guys are basically just getting what's blocked and they're not losing yards. And from those analytics, they'll look fine. But also, this rushing offense had the second lowest explosive run rate last year, JJ, and the lowest missed tackle rate. So those are both things that are firmly in Kenneth Walker's wheelhouse, where, and also the scheme fit. Like, they were 10th best in as far as zone rushing rate. Walker last year in zone runs, dude, 3rd highest explosive run rate and missed tackle rate. So I like the fit. And as well as he's a competent pass catcher. I know that was something we all kind of debated back and forth about when he came out as a prospect, but he's proven, I mean, unfortunately, Chris Collinsworth doesn't agree with us, but he's proven that Kenneth Walker is a good receiver if you look at, regardless of any analytics that we can pull up, yards per route run and first downs per route run. So I love the fit. We can all talk about volume and his health and can he hold up to the perceived workload and what that looks like. But I don't know how we don't walk away like really, really high about this.
Yeah, no, I agree. I sent a tweet out actually that immediately after it happened. I said, when I said I was in on Kenneth Walker this year, I really meant next year. Or, you know, I really meant 2026. But no, like the Walker receiving thing is an interesting discussion for me, because I was definitely someone from an analytical perspective where I said, this isn't a profile that, or someone that profiles to be a high volume pass catcher at the next level. And the way I'm prospecting and the way that I'm looking at stuff, I'm not necessarily looking at running back receiving ability the way that people would probably think. I'm thinking about it from the from the perspective of how frequently that running back might be used as a pass catcher, which I think are two very, very different things. Because I've used this analogy / example many, many times before, but I think that like there's like, if you think about this from a 0 to 100 from a percentile standpoint, maybe the top 5, 95th to 100th percentile receiving running backs are special in this league at doing things like lining up out of the slot, maybe, going out wide and doing some funky things as pure receivers, Christian McCaffrey type players, right? Like very special pass catching running backs. And then on the other end, and I always throw him under the bus, no pun intended, but Gus Edwards, who just as a 0, like he will never be that guy. And you could argue like a Chris Rodriguez. We'll get to that in a second.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
He'll never be that pass catcher because he's not that good at it in general. And like there's obviously a skill set in being able to, take a swing pass, something that most running backs just generally do, and do that effectively, right? And be able to have the right burst and acceleration to make something happen off of a play that, is something that most running backs can do. But with that being said, I think that the majority of running backs, I'm talking like 90% of them, live in the middle. They live in this area where if there's a scheme or a situation where a coach comes in and just wants to deploy the running back in that way, like we saw with Kenneth Walker 2 years ago, where he had like a 13% target share, then that can happen. Like that can work. The unfortunate side with Walker is that, 3 of his 4 seasons so far, he's been, around that like 7-8% mark in target share because the coaching staff is deploying him in a particular way. Right. And so like the way I always look at these types of like running backs and these archetypes is I think coaches view running backs in a way of sort of like subconsciously calculating their collisions and calculating the amount of hits that they would be taking. And if you're a coach that's coaching Kenneth Walker, I agree. I don't think he's a bad, like I remember Collinsworth making that comment in the Super Bowl whenever, like saying that he was a bad receiver. I think that's a very far, like that's way too far because there's a difference between the ability and the deployment of, right?
Yes.
The deployment of Kenneth Walker has shown not that he's a bad receiver. It's just that he's not seen the volume through the air that other high receiving, volume receiving backs would see. And so my stance is that like a coach looks at a player of a Walker archetype and they say to themselves, hey, yes, he's a capable pass catcher, but we want to use him so much on these outside runs that we're going to pound him and use him a lot on the, like we saw that throughout his time in college. Like when he was at Michigan State, before he was at Michigan State, he carried the ball like 300 plus, like he was getting so much work in college that yes, you have to then say there's likely a reason that he wasn't used a little bit more through the air. I just don't know I don't think that anyone would sit here and say that Walker is the same kind of receiving back as Christian McCaffrey, but I think he's capable enough. My question with the Chiefs though is, do you think that that's going to be there for like if you were to sit here and just generalize a target share for Kenneth Walker, and this isn't a take that you have to be concrete in, but like, do you think that he's capable of a 12% target share there? Or do you think we're going to see more of that like 8 to 10% there?
I think he's capable of it only because, and this also comes down to like what we're seeing schematically defensive wise. And I don't want to get too deep in the weeds with that, but more too high structures and how teams are combating that. So you're seeing more utilization of, and some of the target shares going more to tight ends and attacking that now, and especially with guys because you have to be in those too high structures to beat that defensive structure. It's like you need guys to be able to create with the ball in their hands underneath in those too high shells. So a lot of that's running backs, but a lot of that target share is going more to tight ends.
Right.
But how Andy Reid wants to attack that, I mean, dude, they've basically been using Rashee Rice in that type of role. Mm-hmm. So if Rashee Rice takes a hit with those underneath targets going more to Kenneth Walker, I could see it happening.
Yeah. I think another, by the way, just to give another example of the like archetype I'm speaking to, they're different running backs and they have different styles, but I felt very similarly to Quinshon Judkins coming out last year.
I got another one that I'll mention here too.
No, you throw yours out.
The last year production model and how things changed and what you talked about with Walker taking volume, or basically Michigan State taking volume away from the passing game and running him a ton on early downs. Mm-hmm. Aren't we just discussing the final year of college for Ashton Jeanty? Where his target share, his receptions, all that stuff dried up, and they were like, "You could get the rushing record. We're just going to feed you volume here and take away your pass game stuff." Yeah. It's not because of anything changed as him as a receiver. It's just how they wanted to deploy him.
Yeah, because he had a great receiving profile the year before that. You know, it was all there. So yeah, I mean, like I don't I think that's a very good example of the nuance that I was speaking to earlier about Twitter, because I had sent like there is a strong correlation between receiving production in college to receiving production in the NFL. Mm-hmm. But I think that the thing that I want people to really understand there is that it's not really necessarily, I mean, oftentimes it is, but it's not necessarily an ability thing. And I remember whenever I started to adjust, receiving yards per team pass attempt at running back, because I realized a couple years ago that was a pretty, a more important metric than I realized at running back. It is obviously at wide receiver, but it is still at running back. When I adjusted that more for age and strength of schedule and stuff, Kenneth Walker looked better than, he initially did whenever he was coming out, within the ZAP model and stuff. So, I don't think I think he's a better, I mentioned Quinshon Judkins. I think he's a better pass catcher than Judkins is, but Judkins is sort of in this place where this is part of the reason why I wanted a non-pass catching back, maybe Hampton's a bad example because I actually think he is a decent pass catcher, but, maybe a Judkins is the example. Him going to a place like Denver last year would have been really interesting from a ceiling perspective because all of a sudden you're going to get some of these easy looks. That they're going to hyper target the running back out of the backfield. So even if that wasn't sort of part of his repertoire, if you will, coming out and part of his arsenal and how people kind of viewed him, it would just default that way in Denver for him because that's the way Sean Payton runs his offenses. Whereas RJ Harvey had more of a bulkier receiving profile than a Judkins did. And so, it was an easier fit to make. But that to me is when you get that combination, because very rarely are you going to get flawless running backs. But when you get that combination of okay, I'm deficient here, but this offense allows me to do that thing. So now all of a sudden I can have that really high end ceiling that I otherwise wouldn't have had.
Well, and I think we're going to have, foreshadowing here, I think we're going to have a very similar conversation when we get to Jadarian Price later.
Yes, we definitely will. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, it's very much a similar conversation that we all had around Kenneth Walker as a prospect, where it's can he do it? I mean, the limited sample and how that projects and stuff. I mean, dude, I was out there looking up Jadarian Price high school film to sit here and get some type of feel because out of Notre Dame, you're okay, well, I can watch all of his targets in literally 2 minutes. You got anything more?
All right, let's move on to Alec Pierce. He gets the contract with Indianapolis, and then Michael Pittman gets traded to the Steelers. What's your overall read with this situation? If you look at Price, if you look at Pittman, and you look at these two teams now.
Dude, I mean, I thought the Colts contract for Alec Pierce, I'm not going to say that it's absolute insanity, but it's aggressive, man.
Yeah, I mean, good for Pierce getting that back.
Oh, it's great for Pierce. But when we're talking about all of a sudden he's jumped into a stratosphere where right now you're just looking at average yearly salary. This dude is 11th in the NFL, right behind T. Higgins. That's some rarefied air, man. So the Colts are putting it on him to be their alpha, number one pass catcher this year. Now, is he going to get competition with Tyler Warren? Absolutely. But I mean, Pierce looks like on paper he's ready to take that next step. And I know a lot of it last year was the downfield usage, but his splits, no matter how you stack up his analytics, are strong across the board. 1.95 yards per route run against man, 2.4 versus zone. His splits are equally strong versus single and too high. So he's got the skills and the athletic upside. Early right now, I mean, I moved him up to wide receiver 25. That might be a little bit low considering who's challenging him outside of Tyler Warren for targets in this passing offense. Josh Downs is there, but we already kind of had and alluded to the conversation of he's not even a full-time player in the offense. Maybe that changes, but I mean, Do you think that it would be reasonable for because I've been chewing on this the last 24 hours for a dynasty manager to just see if they could really buy low? Because Josh Downs is still a buy. I mean, it's not like he has a high price tag in Dynasty right now. Now, obviously, there's not competition there with Michael Pittman gone, and maybe people would see through. But I guess my question would be, do you think there's any chance that they end up deploying Josh Downs more on the outside? I think it's possible. I think it's equally possible that they just go draft another guy in the third or fourth round because we've got a lot of guys that fit the archetype in this class that I really like that are going to fall into that third and fourth round range that are just toss them into the perimeter and they can fill the Alec Pierce role of last year, I think.
Not only that, I would argue there's a lot of players in this class that fit this like Chris Ballard archetype that he loves, which is these big bodied, outside, fast, he did the same. He did this. He did it with Alec Pierce. He did it with Adonai Mitchell. Like I'm ready for that. Like, and there's a lot of those guys. A lot.
Like we could talk. I mean, like just Chris Brazel. Come on,
right? Exactly.
Andy, Ted Hurst, Bryce Lance. Like,
right.
Take your pick.
Even like a Jacoby Lane, you could throw out there. You know, like there's a lot of those like long guy. You know, like just has that are 6'3" and taller. But like, there's a lot of those guys also that they're questionable. Like there's a lot of high variance prospects in there. So I think from like my guess is that they do draft someone to play opposite of, like you said, maybe it's around 3, maybe early day 3. Maybe I don't know what their draft capital situation looks like.
I'm pulling it up literally right now. Yeah. Like, I don't know their picks off the top of my head.
Yeah. But I do think that they're going to have to do something there to just get someone in there. And that's what scares me a little bit with Josh Downs. But if you can get him relatively cheap, because I think a lot, like he's at the point in his career where people just kind of give up, right? Like dynasty managers are just kind of over it. I mean, Jaden Reed, you could argue the same thing. People are just kind of like, you know, like he flashed, he had his moment early on in his career. He's very efficient, but he's just going to be this guy. I think you could argue the exact same argument for Jaden Reed because they just lost Romeo Doubs and they don't have, you know, as deep of a wide receiver room at this moment. And Matthew Golden didn't show us much last year. And so, maybe, but like it's difficult when there's no regime change, you know, when there's no coaching staff change that really signals, oh, maybe this coaching staff will like this guy more and throw him on the outside.
I don't disagree at all. And the Colts have obviously they gave away their first round pick for Sauce, but they still do have their second, third, and fourth round picks. Yeah. So I think they're going to take a wide receiver with one of those picks. It just depends on where, but I mean, back to your point, I honestly rather would make the bet on Jaden Reed out of the two of those guys, only because, I mean, you talk about Downs in the system and he's probably slot confined, but the other part about this is he's had a really hard time staying healthy. Like, I don't know if we've seen a fully healthy season from Josh, and you could say the same thing about Jaden Reed. So
the thing with Pierce that I think is interesting is that even at Cincinnati in college, his target share never got above 22%. Mm-hmm. And that I think is the big question mark that I have. And you know, you mentioned like they're looking at him, hypothetically, they're looking at him as an alpha right now, or at least as their one. I don't know if that is really going to be part of his range of outcomes. Like I mean, obviously super efficient, obviously one of the best down the field receivers in the game right now. Like he's one of the rare players where the athleticism like completely translated to the NFL. It took a little bit of time, right? Mm-hmm. Like he's gotten better, and props to him for getting better, but like a 22.8 and a 20-yard ADOT the last 2 years. And then, you know, you look at, he's maxed out at an 18% target share in his offense so far throughout his career. He only got to 21.6% in college. You put all that together and you're like, is there an alpha profile here? Like, is that really what we're banking on? Like, I give him, like, I don't want to rule him out because he's gotten better. That's my hesitation. But if his price tag gets out of control, I'll probably end up being out.
I don't disagree at all. And I just thought it was so aggressive. And again, the Colts, they're in the building. They see him practice every day. So they have a better feel about what he can do. But like, I have the same concerns you have because he's never been a high end target earner. And we can all talk about wide receiver skills and stuff. Earning targets is a skill, and you either can do it at a high end clip. And that was one of the, if we be kind of rewind all the way back to the Amon-Ra St. Brown conversation and the Rashee Rice conversation of previous years, where it was like, are these breakouts real? Are these things going to translate? And it's like, dude, you don't just roll out of bed, and not every single player that's thrust into one of these situations can earn a 25 to 27% target share. They can't. So can Pierce do that? We shall see. If I was the Colts and making the decisions, I would say, look, let's flip this. You wouldn't have signed Daniel Jones to a contract. Fine. Let's sign that. Let's make Alec Pierce play on the franchise tag and prove the concept of him operating as our number one. If we're going to pay him top 12 money, we're going to pay him top 12 money, whether that's a year down the road or not. Yeah. So like, I thought it was kind of crazy that they did this in the flip side of the way that I would have done this.
Yeah, I also I haven't queried this, but I do wonder how many wide receivers in recent history have not hit a 20% target share during their rookie contract and then hit like a 25% target share after that. You know,
I'm curious
because given this quarterback situation there, obviously Dimes coming off the Achilles, like I do think Alec Pierce to hit like top 20 wide receiver status will probably need to be in that like 24% higher type target share range. And so I wonder if we've ever even seen this before. You know, I don't know. Someone can query that if you
yeah,
want
I was
to.
like, that's a great question.
Yeah,
I don't, off the top of my head, I don't know who all of a sudden.
I mean, maybe like the only guy for like Devontae Parker, maybe when he ended up blowing up. But yeah, I mean, but even that's a terrible outcome because it's not like it was, long lasting. And then Michael Pittman going to Pittsburgh. Do you care at all about this?
I think it's a better NFL fit than it is for fantasy. I mean, we have all the quarterback worries, concerns, don't know who's going to be there. Is it Aaron Rodgers? Is it somebody like Kirk Cousins? Who the heck knows, man? I mean, right now, I've just got him slotted at wide receiver 34. Now, I have him ahead of DK Metcalf right now just because of, again, target earning and the archetypes of these wide receivers. I think Pittman is a better target earner. I think he is a really good fit for how Pittsburgh constructed this wide receiver room. Like DK, we know what he does, man. Like he destroys single high, he can get downfield and stuff like that, but he's never going to be and hasn't been a 26, 27% target share guy.
Never.
Pittman, if you match up these two skill sets, Pittman's numbers, especially last year, and looking at, I mean, this is just a drop-in fit of what he was doing last year for the Colts. Like all the Steelers are going to ask him to do is go out and be the guy we go to against two high structures and single high. We're just going to go to DK. And honestly, this is probably going to be a really good thing for us when we're looking at trying to figure out where we're ranking these guys based off of the matchups and stuff like that, and people for DFS and all that kind of stuff on a weekly basis, where it was like last year, I just kept telling people with Pierce, I was like, all right, team runs a lot of single high. It's Alec Pierce week. Okay, well, team runs a lot of two high. It's Michael Pittman week. And so I think it's a really good fit for more so from an NFL standpoint than it is for us in fantasy, because I mean, if it's Aaron Rodgers, how many weapons can he support at this point in his career?
Yeah, sure.
You know, so
I think it was a smart move for Pittsburgh to do. You know, this is my Yinzer bias aside. I think it was a smart thing for Pittsburgh. My only question with Pittman, who I think has been like kind of underrated as just a player throughout his career. You know, like he's a solid wide receiver. I fear that what if he doesn't have it anymore? You know, like last year he had an 8.4 ADOT and he had the worst yak of his career on that low of an ADOT. And so there's a little bit of that going on. He's had some of these injuries that he's dealt with. I think it was like a back a couple of years ago, which is always scary. But to me, I think Pittsburgh also did this because it's an organization that cares so deeply about culture, even though from a culture perspective, they're so in love with mediocrity. But like from a like Michael Pittman is like for all intents and purposes, from a teammate perspective and from like an organization and fan perspective, everyone loves Michael Pittman. I think that's another reason why they ended up making that move. But I agree. I think it's a better real life move than a fantasy move. Let's talk about Malik Willis down in Miami. How much does this worry you about Devon Achane and Jalen Waddle?
It worries me a lot more for Achane than it does Waddle. Do I have concerns about Waddle? Yeah, I mean, but I kind of feel like we already saw that kind of play out last year, JJ. Like we've already seen the run heavy Miami offense and Jalen Waddle operating as a one. I mean, that was last year, dude. Yeah. Like week 7 through 15, Tua was only averaging 25.3 passing attempts. So, I mean, okay, fine. Malik Willis is there. We're going to throw him into the same kind of volume conversation. I mean, he was wide receiver 29 in fantasy points per game during that stretch, wide receiver 33 in XFP per game. I mean, Jalen Waddle, again, going back to it, like we have worries about Alec Pierce earning a 23-24% target share. I don't have those concerns about Waddle. During that stretch, he earned a 23% target share. So with Waddle, I kind of look at this as, doesn't this feel like yesteryear DJ Moore conversation, JJ? Where it's like, can Justin Fields support him? Is he going to be good enough? And then DJ Moore had the talent and the target volume to pay off on all of that handedly. Yeah. So I'm not that worried about Jalen Waddle. I am worried about Achane. I mean, like, dude, I had a hard time ranking him. Like right now I have him at like RB10 only because the target volume is going to go down. Like it has to. He was fifth in raw targets amongst running backs last year. Like, he's not sniffing 85 targets in this offense. He's not going to sniff a 19% target share. And you look at the archetype of running back, like, he got 238 rushing attempts last year. We can't project him for that much more. I mean, that was 14th in the NFL. So he feels like a player where it's like, okay, well, now he's got to live with creating his value on early downs and touchdowns. Can he do that? Sure, but Malik Willis is going to also eat into his rushing production and his red zone production, and the target volume's not going to be there. So Achane feels like a guy you're drafting probably at or above his ceiling in a lot of aspects where he's going to fall. I mean, I can't see him dropping outside of the top 10 running backs in ADP like in the summer. Can you, JJ? And at that point, it's like
probably not. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, fine. Like, he's a locked in RB1, but if he doesn't get the pass game stuff and the touchdown luck goes sideways, is he a top 15 running back where you're overdrafting him? Because I don't see top 5 upside here. Am I wrong?
I think at the very least, people should walk away from what's gone on in Miami this offseason, viewing Devon Achane as a much, much more volatile running back than they viewed him in November, right?
Agreed.
Where, you know, Mike McDaniel was still there. I mean, like, if you want to just look at this from the lens of volatility, I think that's fair, right? Because you got a completely new coaching staff. Mike McDaniel was a great fit. I remember speaking of talking about prospects to fit, I mean, like, when Devon Achane went to Miami, I remember being like, you know, is Devon Achane big enough? You know, whenever we were prospecting him and stuff, and like just being like, but obviously he has a speed, and he had, you know, small running backs. You don't always get the kind of production in college that Devon Achane had. And if you go look at the prospect guide, when he landed in Miami, nothing mattered anymore for me, because that spot was too perfect for Devon Achane. And so, you know, we saw that spot being with Mike McDaniel in this zone heavy scheme that we've seen these incredibly athletic and fast running backs. I mean, like, we'd seen it with like Raheem Mostert types, you know, throughout his career and stuff, right? But now you actually have like an uber talented player, not just like a day 3 running back that the Shanahan system randomly found that's fast. You had this guy in Achane that could do everything. And then obviously he really grew as a receiver. It's just a new coaching staff. We don't know what this is going to look like. And so strictly from that perspective, yeah. And then like you can never just assume that a player is going to see a 20% target share, you know, a running back, that is, you know, and so that's frightening. Malik Willis has not had a single game in his NFL career with more than 25 pass attempts. Like, he hasn't hit that mark in a game throughout his career. And so I love the point of Miami was really pass heavy last year, run heavy last year. Their pass rate over expected was minus 5.8%. And Malik Willis can throw the deep ball. Like, that's one thing that's he's been, at least so far, you know, limited sample, that he's looked good with and that will help Jalen Waddle, I think. Probably be a better and best ball type player, more than likely, with Waddle. But yeah, Achane, I'm scared, man. And that's coming from someone who last 2 years I've been all over Achane. I've loved Achane from a fantasy perspective, and I'm just scared of what this might end up looking like.
I emphatically agree. And then, you know, not to belabor the point too, but this is also a team that I think, looking at their current iteration of their depth chart and stuff, where I think they're locked in to take a wide receiver in this draft class, probably in round 3, since they have 3 round 3 picks. Travis
Etienne to New Orleans. Do you think this is bad? And then at the same time, Etienne no longer, or I shouldn't say do you think it's bad. How bad do you think it is, or how good? You know, what's this look like for Etienne? And then let's talk about Bashal Tutin, because, you know, Etienne's no longer in his way too.
Man, I think it's good for Etienne that he's going to get a crap ton of volume. And I think we're going to see very similar run out to what happened in Jacksonville last year. Probably the red zone role is all his and just his alone. I think Kamara's out of town now.
Yeah, are we assuming, is that just an assumption at this point? Like, are we?
That's kind of one that I'm making, man. I just think Kamara doesn't want to go anywhere else. Like, he's talked about it very, very openly. Like, that he would basically, like, I'm not going to say pull the Gronk and be like, fine, you want to trade me? I'm going to retire. But like, I think they could like legit cut him, and I wouldn't be surprised. I hate that for Kamara, but I mean, what else are we supposed to expect? Like, with Etienne getting the big contract. So Etienne, like, I'm very high on him holding down. Like, he's going to be Kellen Moore's version of Saquon Barkley in New Orleans, in the sense that he's going to get all the freaking work. Now, How efficient is he going to be with that work is very fair to question. I mean, ETN was not good on a per touch basis, regardless of whatever metric you look at. Like, last year he was outside the top 30 running backs in explosive run rate, rushing success rate, missed tackles, yards after contact, like everything. Yeah. Everything. He was bad. So at this point in his career, does that change? Okay, probably not, maybe. But okay, well then, is he just brand new Kyron Williams is the way that I'm kind of looking at with ETN.
Yeah, but that's Kyron Williams in a worse offense. Yes. You know? Yes. That's now it's going to be priced that way. Hopefully, hopefully it's not like they're going back to back. But yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, the Saints were dead last in PPR points at running back last year. Now you can look at the running backs they had, sure, and like you had these like random bursts where like Devin Neal looked capable enough, as like a solid backup for that like 3-game stretch. But then they were running just not very studly running backs towards the Audric Estime and such. And so like we shouldn't expect a lot of production out of that backfield, obviously with a rookie quarterback and then with Spencer Rattler to start the year last year. I do think that like Shuck's development's going to matter a lot here. I'm looking at ETN right now and I'm probably not, I would assume I'm not higher or lower. I'm just going to probably be around market with him.
I'm Daniel Jeremiah.
And I'm Greg Rosenthal.
And this is 40s and Free Agents.
The games may be over, but the NFL never stops. This is my favorite part of the calendar.
Yeah, mine too, Greg. Free agency, the combine, the NFL draft, pro days, trades. This is where teams reshape their future.
This is where Daniel Jeremiah makes his money. On 40s and Free Agents, we break down every move that actually matters.
From my draft evaluations, mock drafts, and team fits,
to my top 101 free agents and how real rosters are built, cap space, contracts, and all the tough decisions included.
You got quarterbacks on the move.
We got teams rebuilding. It's hope season.
Yeah, absolutely. It's hope season. We'll tell you what's real, what's noise, and what it means for your favorite team.
Smart analysis, real conversations every week.
I don't know about the smart, but definitely analysis. Listen to 40s and Free Agents on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Let's talk about Bashal Tutin, because this is the great divide right now in America. Is Chris Rodriguez signing with Jacksonville yesterday, right? Because we're recording this on Thursday. Signing with Jacksonville yesterday, but Bashal Tutin was sitting atop the depth chart. Now, what do you look at with his depth chart of LaQuinn Allen, Bashal Tutin, Chris Rodriguez? How much does Chris Rodriguez matter? You get a lot of people arguing both sides. Where are you at?
I'm just going to be on the Tutin train. I'm totally fine with it. Like, I feel like Rodriguez landing there, was a glorious thing if you're a Tutin stan, because there is going to be this divide and that's going to keep his ADP in check. But honestly, dude, like, doesn't this feel almost like the best case of run out? Like, I know a lot of people are not putting it that way, but like, if you wanted to make the fever dream for Bashal Tutin, it's like, well, you didn't want to see them go get another guy in the draft that like is a better pass catcher, profiles in that way, or them invest other capital like a second, third round pick and another running back. So for me, like, yeah, bring Chris Rodriguez in. Like, we know what that skill set is. Is he a very good running back on early downs? Sure, you can make that case. He was top 12 in missed tackles forced and yards after contact per attempt last year. But also, he's pretty much a like net zero in the passing game.
Exactly.
And I'm not that worried about LaQuinn Allen. I wasn't as high on him as a prospect as a lot of other people. But Bashal Tutin, it's like, I'm just going to bet on the talent, dude. Like, on a per touch basis, this guy was amazing last year. He was top 12 in missed tackle rate and a rushing success rate. And this is also a coaching staff and a freaking GM that like talked about this player before they even got the job in Jacksonville. So I'm just going to bet on the talent. Like, I've got Bashal Tutin as a top 15 running back right now. I think he's got that type of upside, and I think he could be an RB1. And I'm not going to worry about, because we don't see this happen very much in the NFL just in general. Like, oh, well, Bashal Tutin's not going to be a bell cow. Who the hell in the NFL is a bell cow these days?
Right.
Like playing
even Bijan Robinson wasn't a bell cow,
Exactly. Yeah. So like, is Rodriguez going to be part of this backfield? Sure. But I look at this as like a 60 to 65% split.
Yeah.
Probably in Bashal Tutin's wheelhouse. And Rodriguez, it really comes down to, do you think he's going to really eat into the red zone role? Because if he turns into the Tyler Algier and he's vulturing touchdowns, or good Lord, if he turns into the The worst case scenario for this, JJ, is that this turns into the Seattle backfield and Chris Rodriguez is Zach Charbonnet, and then we're all crying in our hands for the whole year. But I don't think that's how this is going to go.
Yeah, the empty calorie role that Kenneth Walker played last year, where, just a lot of the between the 20s stuff that we just don't care about. Yeah, so look, I was huge on Tootin last year as a prospect. I'm kind of going to take you through this journey because I want to be very clear with where I stand with Tootin. So I was high on Tootin as a prospect. He goes to Jacksonville. Obviously, I had Tootin ahead of Cam Scadaboo in rookie drafts last year. Like, you can go look at rankings and stuff.
I think I did too.
And, that could be a really bad, in season, it looked horrible. Tootin has a season, and throughout last year, I'm like, hey, add Bashaw Tootin, and that was an L, right? And so I think a lot of people are just like, and then I had Tootin on my buy candidates episode as a buy candidate. Then I started writing the prospect guide because I do the year 2 stuff in the prospect guide. And in Tootin's profile, the one thing that I called out, and then I sent a newsletter out about this, it was something along the lines of like, maybe don't buy too aggressively with Bashaw Tootin right now because there are some numbers definitely that scare me a tad. The main one that scared me with Tootin was that one of the reasons that I liked him so much as a prospect, because I think that he actually fit the Kenneth Walker archetype from a prospect standpoint. And so the one thing that scared me about Tootin and what he did year 1 was that he was very explosive coming out. Like, that was why we loved him, or part of the reason why we loved him. And then we didn't see that at all his rookie season. He was more of a grinder and bruiser as a rookie, right? Like, he had his success rate was substantially better than Travis Etienne's last year. I think Jacksonville saw that, and that's why Etienne had 12 goal line rushes, Tootin had 7. But like, when you look at their overall volume, that's a pretty big discrepancy, or a pretty small discrepancy given the amount of volume those two guys were seeing. You would expect Travis Etienne to have a lot more, aka they were using Bashaw Tootin at the goal line, in those red zone packages relatively frequently for the amount of volume that he was seeing overall and in general. And so then, like, after I sent that newsletter, people thought that it meant that I'm not buying Bashaw Tootin. I'm still buying Bashaw Tootin. I'm saying just pump the brakes for a second, because there are some things that signal that this could, like, his explosive run rate was so poor last year that if you look at history and like the 10 to 15 running backs since 2011 who have kind of been in his bucket and area, I mean, it's whiff after whiff. Like, it's just bad player after bad player. And so that was a concern. I'm calling out a red flag. That's kind of how I approach this stuff, is that I'm looking at it from a pro and con standpoint. But the overall stance was still, let's buy Bashaw Tootin, because we also knew that Travis Etienne was likely, not going to re-sign there. And so now we're sitting here with Chris Rodriguez entering the picture, and you have Tootin and LaQuint Allen. To me, LaQuint Allen is more than likely like a Dare Gumbawale plus, right? Like like that's likely the kind of role he would play. I think he's better than Agumbawale. I didn't mind LaQuint Allen as a prospect, but it was very clear when you're a day 3 back with that kind of receiving profile, you're probably going to play that kind of like third down back type role in the NFL. Like, that's where you're gonna be locked into. You could argue that caps Bashaw Tootin's ceiling, but like we're saying, very rarely are you going to find a bell cow anyway in the NFL that's playing all 3 downs. Like, a lot of it doesn't mean that Tootin's a 0 as a pass catcher because LaQuint Allen is on there. And most downs that offenses play are first and second down. They don't play as many third downs as they do first and second down, which means Bashaw Tootin will be on the field a decent bit. You get Chris Rodriguez coming in now, and I would argue that Rodriguez, like, from a fit perspective, makes a ton of sense for this offense, because in today's game, you're going to have this rotation of running backs. You're not going to have these bell cows, and you're getting a guy in Rodriguez who can get you the tough yards and does something relatively similar as Tootin from that perspective, which what we saw from Tootin year 1 was a really high success rate and a really good grinded out mentality, where Jacksonville's EPA was great when Bashaw Tootin was on the field. Chris Rodriguez has been a very underrated probably player in the league from a pure rushing standpoint, but we're playing fantasy football. We're not playing real football GM here, right? Chris Rodriguez has 6 career catches, and in 5 collegiate seasons, he had 20 receptions, right? I know that he was great in Kentucky with Liam Cohen. I know all of this stuff went down.
Are you aware, JJ? Do you know that he knows Liam Cohen beforehand?
How many times?
Everybody's told me that too.
How many times do we have to be burned by the non-pass catchers in the NFL and fantasy football before we realize that, like, that's not the archetype that we should chase? I'm not saying, now when I say that, I'm not saying that Chris Rodriguez can't outscore Bashal Tutin. I'm saying from a game theory standpoint, you should absolutely bet on Bashal Tutin being the higher ceiling running back there because he showed a pass catching profile in college. Chris Rodriguez did not do that. And then last year, yes, you can say Tutin wasn't a pass catcher or receiver in that offense. Well, they had Travis Etienne and they had LaQuinn Allen. That doesn't mean that they're not. Look at who he's competing with right now. You know, if this is it for Bashal Tutin, I agree. The run out here is very, very good because they hypothetically could have gone like a, I don't know, more like all around back in like on like day two, like a Jonah Coleman or something like, you know, like just getting someone who's just like, or Emmett Johnson.
Like, dude, I was going to say Emmett Johnson. That's a good call.
Yes. Like if they went, that would cap his ceiling. Like that would scare me more. I'm not saying that his ceiling can't be capped because it could. Chris Rodriguez, what if he is the goal line back, right? Like you're saying, like what if this is a Seattle situation? We have to be open-minded about that. But my point is that what if he's not? If he's not, then Bashal Tutin is that 65, 70% running back rush share type player who's probably going to see a 10, 11% target share in a Jacksonville offense with Liam Cohen. That is an RB2 and potentially RB1 if things break the right way in fantasy football. It's not a given. It's a high variance thing and situation, but that's my thought process in going through all of this is like, why, and that's how the story of Bashal Tutin could unfold. And if it does, I'm going to chase that ceiling. Of course I'm going to chase the ceiling. You know, that's how I play fantasy.
Same. And the other point about all of this too is, dude, what if this is just last year's Jacksonville backfield and Tutin is going to inherit what ETN was doing last year and Rodriguez, they're just asking him to do what Tutin was doing last year. Like,
which is very possible.
That's equally possible. And it's like, okay, Tutin in the ETN role where he's getting most of the routes and stuff and he's splitting fine. He splits the red zone work and stuff, but we know Rodriguez is not going to work in as a pass catcher. Okay. Wheels up. Rodriguez is a flex, a touchdown dependent flex, and Tutin is a top 12 running back probably.
How much do you care about salary with this? Because that's an argument that the pro Rodriguez crowd is throwing out there that the money is not bad for Rodriguez. Because what does he get, like a max of 12 mil or something like that, guaranteed 6, like a 1 year 6, something along those lines. Essentially, it's not that different from like a Rico Dowdle deal, right? And the way I'll say what I see with this is that we are splitting hairs when it comes to this kind of stuff because every team has a different approach to how they spend money. And if you're going to sit here and say this guy is so much more important than this guy because he's making $2 million more a season or in guaranteed money, that's so irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. You have to scale this properly, right? Like a running back contract is so low to begin with because of the way the teams view that position that the delta between one to another is just not significant enough for me to really like care. I'm not saying that like we should completely reject and ignore how much money a player is getting. I'm saying that should not take over the narrative at all because we should be looking at how the fit and how talented the actual player is.
I emphatically agree with you. And I thought Ryan Heath, shout out to Ryan Heath, had a wonderful tweet about this and said recent running backs who signed with similar total guarantees to Chris Rodriguez in terms of percentage of the cap. And tell me if this is a laundry list of running backs that you would be worried about because they got around the same amount of money, JJ. Jamal Williams with New Orleans, Alexander Mattison with Minnesota, Dalvin Cook with the Jets, Antonio Gibson with the Patriots, and Najee Harris with the Chargers. Now, Najee got hurt. We didn't see how that play out. Yeah. But does the rest of that list really or should really scare anybody? So, no, people can miss me with the contract talk. To me, that all comes down to like, finding a reason to twist the knife and prove your prior or your narrative is correct. That's all that says to me.
And look, again, there's nuance to this. This isn't a clear, what we're doing here, Debro, is we're looking at these ranges of outcomes here. Yes. And we know that it can go south for Tutin, but we're also recognizing that like could this not be a Chase Brown situation where like we don't see the crazy production right away, but the situation is ripe. There's not a great draft class. And then all of a sudden he's the bell cow. Like he's the dude, right? Like I'm fine with chasing that. If we get Tutin as like a fringe top 20 running back in redraft, like I'm fine chasing that simply because that's not going to completely slay my team if I miss, and I'd rather chase the upside.
I emphatically agree. And back to the original point that I was trying to make too, is that like, I think because of all the pushback about Rodriguez, we're not going to see a meteoric rise of Tootin as like RB12, RB13 in ADP when we flip over the cards like a week before the NFL season. I think that's going to keep his ADP in check. Yeah. To places where it's like, dude, if you go wide receiver heavy early, you're taking the swing on a guy I'm drafting an RB2, but he's an RB1, and if everything hits, but there's some risk in the profile, then Tootin's the swing that you probably should take in every single draft, because his ADP is going to have probably a hard ceiling with the Rodriguez stuff.
Yeah, I mean, look, if there's going to be some drafts where you're going to be able to get him at like RB3 on your team. If you go like RB to start or something like that, that is like chef's kiss. Yes. Good God, like you can get.
That's winning from the flex, baby, all day.
Yeah. I mean, like that's the perfect kind of high variance, high upside player to go in that situation. Okay. One more. We have Mike Evans in San Francisco. Do you like the fit? Are you excited? You going to draft him?
Yeah, I'm going to draft him, man. I think this is just Devontae Adams of last year. This is going to a good team. I know that, if you look at the 1.76 yards per route run, there's going to be a lot of people that are like, oh, he's slowing down and the hamstrings and all the EMF BS, which I put no stock into any of that. That's hoodoo, voodoo, medicine, whatever kind of made up crap. I don't worry about that. But Evans, I think, still has plenty of juice in the tank. Like, he's evolved as he's gotten older. He's an amazing route runner. Like, 146 qualifying wide receivers last year. He was second in separation and route win rate. He's not cooked, man. I will be investing in Mike Evans heavily, just like I did last year. It didn't work out last year, but again, like with all the injury stuff, you probably just get the injury discount this year, JJ.
Yeah, I also think Baker was just not good last year.
Dude, yes.
Like
I think he wasn't healthy. I think he was horrible for most of the year.
Let's not, like, people should not ignore the fact that he got a decent quarterback upgrade. If you're looking at 2025 Baker, like whole season Baker, this is a quarterback upgrade. Whether you want to say it's scheme, Kyle Shanahan, whatever, situationally it's an upgrade. So it's a good spot for Mike Evans to be in.
And I think it's also like, speaking on the as far as the quarterback and stuff, it's also noteworthy to talk about the fact that Brock Purdy has had a 7% or higher passing touchdown rate in 3 of the last 4 seasons. Yeah. And a 49ers offense that, like, really we've always kind of equated to being really run heavy, like weeks 11 through 18 last year. And they were banged up, things like that. This team was also like, they were 50%, like middle of the road 16th in passing rate inside the 10-yard line. And then when we go back to, do we see a healthy version of George Kittle this year? Right. So Juwan Jennings is probably not back. So who's Mike Evans competing with? Like, he might legitimately lead, if he stays healthy, JJ. Mike Evans might legitimately lead the NFL in red zone targets this year. That's not crazy to say.
It's in his range of outcomes for sure. I'm excited for it. Any other player that we didn't talk about, or do you want to just talk prospects here?
I mean, I think Isaiah Likely is somebody that I'll mention really quickly. Like, I mean, absolutely fantastic landing spot, got the contract, and now he's got the clear pathway for targets. So for everybody that we've all like wanted to see the Isaiah Likely breakout, I think it's coming. Like, I've got him as a top 10 tight end this year. Like, my early ranks, I've got him at tight end 7 because, again, who is competing with him for targets? Like,
and the difference,
maybe they draft Carnell Tate, but if they don't draft him at like 4, 5, then it's wheels up for Likely this year, man.
Do you think it signals anything about what the Giants might do in the draft? Like, do you have any read? Like, do you think that they're going to go Jeremiah Love? Do you think that they're going to go offensive line? Like what's the, cause like they have Theo Johnson, who's not terrible, right? But he's, I don't know, like I'm trying to figure out, cause Isaiah Likely is more of a receiving tight end than anything else, right? Yes. Like he's that like, I don't, archetype wise, more Darren Waller than he is Rob Gronkowski. And so, like, I'm just trying to think about like what they're envisioning, how much 12 they're trying to run. Like, is Theo Johnson dust? And then what this might signal with what they're going to do in the draft, if anything. It might not be anything. They might just be, Harbaugh's like, yeah, I want my guy, who I coached for years in Baltimore.
I think there's some small amount of signal. And I think, we've gotten some of the, reading the tea leaves and stuff coming out in the media. I think they're live to take Jeremiah Love. I'm kind of curious right now if Tennessee doesn't let him get past 4. So I think they're live to take Jeremiah Love. I also think they're live to take Carnell Tate at 5. Like, I think both of those avenues, because the defense, I don't think they're going to take any edge kind of guy. Maybe they go with Caleb Downs or a safety at that pick. Them bringing back Jermaine Illuminor, I think, takes them probably off the board to take an offensive lineman. Like tackle was the other spot of need they probably had. So I do think that it's narrowed the window of where they probably go. I think it's probably between Tate and Love right now. So how that shakes out, I think is going to be very interesting. And to your point, the amount of 12, and we kind of talked about this, that they run, man, Theo Johnson's just not somebody, again, going back to kind of the Rodriguez conversation, but at the tight end position, he's not anybody that's ever wowed me from like, okay, fine, we can make the case from athleticism, but that athleticism has never translated to the NFL field as far as efficiency and other things that we look at outside of touchdown variance where it's like, oh, Theo Johnson's really freaking good. It's like, oh, he's athletic, but it's not converting to the NFL field as far as like breaking tackles, yards per route run, doing things like as a receiver.
Special
that really,
things.
Exactly. Like things are outside of like last year. Yeah, he was a top 12 tight end, but almost all of that was because of the touchdowns.
Yeah. It's like a default, like
yes,
tight end too. Like you need to take swings on like, you're either going to be elite or you're not going to be that important in fantasy football, unless you're in a two tight end league or something like that. But a lot of these guys, you just have to take the swing. Like you have to just go for that upside. And if you see that with Likely, then I think it's the right spot for him. All right. This is a segue because we did just talk about Jeremiah Love. So let's talk about some prospects here. This running back class, do you think that it's only better than the 2024 class because of, is it 2024 or 2023? I might have put that down wrong. The one that was just bad, the Ray Davis, Jonathan Brooks.
Oh no, it was 2024 because I pulled up the running backs because I had to go back in the Wayback Machine and be like, which class was this? I think.
Oh my gosh,
Marshawn Lloyd class. Oh, dude.
Marshawn Lloyd class. Yeah.
A lot of this is just the injuries in that class just crush that class. Like Trey Benson can't stay healthy. Marshawn Lloyd, I loved him as a prospect. God's sakes, he can't stay healthy. Braylon Allen didn't do anything. So I think this class is better than that class. But again, that really comes with the caveat of we have to see draft capital because, dude, RB2 through RB5 or 6 of this class, you could paint a picture where one of those guys goes in round 2 and a few of them go in round 3. You could paint a picture also of all these guys drop to round 4 in the NFL draft and then it gets crushed. So I think on a talent perspective, it's probably as good, maybe a little bit better. But again, we also have the we can look back with obvious clarity and say that class didn't hit, but then also injuries crushed that class too.
I think Jax Falcone, who I had on the show a couple weeks ago, Scott, he made the point of because I asked him the same question about having a clear RB2, and it sounds like you don't have a clear RB2, or you just kind of see, And so he made the point. He's like, I don't have a clear RB2, and I can tell you almost emphatically, or he did tell me emphatically, that he will not take a non-Jeremiah Love running back in the first round of rookie drafts this year. Okay. Like that's how he stood firm, just because he didn't see that profile, in this class, and wide receivers deepish enough. I would say there's still a chance that I would, only because I don't think wide receiver is like phenomenal. Like this is probably one of the weaker rookie drafts that we're going to have in some time, in my opinion. Partially, I'm thinking super flex too, because you're not getting the depth at quarterback and whatnot. But with Jeremiah Love, like, is he to you, same tier as Ashton Genty, like that good? Or is he, is he better? Like, where are you at with Love?
I blame you for this. Like when you posed this question in the show sheet, dude, like I had to go back in the last 5 years and I actually but all of these guys, like in the last few years, are exceptional at the top end running backs. I had to go back and stack them up and look at this from just a pure number standpoint about how good of prospects they were. I think Genty stands out by himself on a numbers perspective. Like I think he is probably one of the best running back prospects we've had in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
For me, I think it kind of goes Genty's one. It's for his prospect status.
Yes.
Genty is one based off the numbers, and I think Love is right there with Gibbs at number 2, and you can make that case of Bijan and stuff like that. But I think Genty stands alone by himself as far as like being the best running back prospect. that we've seen in the last 5 years. And I think Love is right there with Gibbs at number 2. And this is not to say Bijan is great, but Bijan on a numbers perspective he was amazing, but you could poke holes, like very slight, but you could poke holes in his profile when he came out.
Yeah. I early on in this process, I thought that Love wasn't going to, because I categorized all these prospects via their Zap score, and I created a legendary performer category this year. So it's like the highest of, it's only the best of the best. Like the hit rates are absurd when players fall in that category. And Jeremiah Love was right below that. He was like a little bit above from a score perspective, like an Amari and Hampton at the time. Right. And so the model really likes Amari and Hampton. So that's part of the reason for that. But as the draft process has gone on, the steam is out of control with Jeremiah Love, and for good reason. Like he's a good prospect, but he's firmly going to be a legendary performer at this point.
I agree.
Because the draft capital is going to be there. If you look at top half first round running backs over the last 15 years, absurd. The only guy who didn't hit was Trent Richardson, and he still gave you a 17 PPR point per game season as a rookie. Like you still gained that value, or at least maintained it. After his rookie season, and recent history is just absurd with how good those running backs have been. So I think when it comes to super flex, are you taking anyone over Jeremiah Love? No. A Mendoza? You're just going Love.
Love is the 101, and this is not a shade against Mendoza and stuff like that. But like, even in the best cases circumstances, what are you hoping out of Mendoza, considering he's not going to run a tough, like what is CJ Stroud type of rookie season?
Jared Goff trajectory type.
He's going to have to run hot on passing touchdowns and the passing volume and all that kind of stuff, where it's like Jeremiah Love, like, bro, you're getting a player where automatically out the gate, if you were to put him on the block and draft him and put him on the block in your dynasty league, like you should be expecting, like people should be offering you like 2 firsts, maybe in some leagues 2 firsts and like a little bit of change. Yeah. And it's like, is anybody going to offer you that much for freaking Mendoza?
Zero chance. Yeah. No. Zero chance. It's gotta be Love first. And then I'll probably end up having Mendoza like in a tier with some of those wide receivers, but let's talk about these running backs. So you don't have a clear RB2.
No.
We talked about Jadarian Price for a second earlier. I'm having a hard time with Price for obvious reasons, right? Because I approach this very analytically and via the Zap model. Now, the model itself can account for teammate production to a degree. Like the higher Jeremiah Love goes in the draft, the more the model will like Jadarian Price. And we don't, if I'm being completely honest and objective, we don't really have a sample of player if Price goes day 2 of a day 2 back with a teammate that was drafted that high in Jeremiah Love, like hypothetically, if he goes, top 8 or whatever, top 10. So I have a hard time with Price simply because you're doing so much projecting with him. Do you agree with that? And can you give me and others any confidence in Price versus what the numbers naturally are going to say, given that he shared a backfield with Jeremiah Love?
I think we're having kind of like the dollar store Kenneth Walker conversation, where it's like a similar profile, but he didn't get fed the volume and he wasn't the lead back. And there's a lot of projecting we're having to do. I mean, we're all projecting like draft capital for him. Like everybody thinks he's going to go in the 2nd round, but what if he dropped to the 3rd round? Like what if, because the NFL I don't care what anybody says, the NFL does double count speed. We see this year over year, whether wide receivers and stuff like that. What if Mike Washington Jr. gets drafted ahead of him because he's a mutant alien? Like he tested out of the out of the gym. And it's like, we can't rule that out. Now, like, do I think that, like, in my mind's eye of like playing range of outcomes, that probably happens? Probably not. But right now I've got fluidity to it because I like Price, the player, but there's a lot of projecting. We're projecting what could his pass game role? Is he captain that? Not even talking about like him as a pass protector, which on a limited basis was rough. Like it is an adventure for Jadarian Price. So outside of all these different factors, it's a projection because of he didn't get the volume. I would have loved Jadarian Price if he freaking stayed in school and came out after a monster year of production, and we would have felt a whole heck of a lot better and just had the Kenneth Walker conversation as of the Kenneth Walker conversation, but a lot more projecting because we don't have the pass game role. And what if he's not a good enough pass protector outside of being a good enough receiver for a team to deploy him in that way? What if he can't pass protect and he's just an early down only guy? I mean, from a rushing perspective, I like him as a prospect. And yes, right now he is my RB2 because the numbers are also very good on a per touch basis, like 31st, 3rd in breakaway rate. He was 25th and 5th in yards after contact per attempt over the last 2 years. But again, to your point, there's a whole lot of volatility that comes with projecting Jadarian Price. And I'm not going to be over the moon and why there is fluidity in that RB2 spot. Like, I can make you a really good case of Mike Washington Jr. being the more complete back. Like, he's the more athletic back. Like, he was really freaking good last year as far as like, he's a home run hitter. He's got the size that teams will covet and that athleticism. And he's honestly like a really underrated pass catcher. Now, is he going to pop from yards per route run? No, but on the film, he's a competent pass catcher. He's done plenty of things in the process and put up more film, whether it's the Senior Bowl or limited opportunities in college as a pass catcher where you can utilize him on wheel routes and things out of the backfield. Now, does he have the hip fluidity to ever be like a true pass game weapon? No. But can you do some things in the passing game where maybe I'm projecting that ceiling to be a little bit higher and that floor to be a little bit higher in the NFL than maybe some are?
Why do you think Mike Washington is not getting more love than he? I mean, I know he's getting some, like the fantasy space obviously is giving him that love, but I mean more from like his draft capital is rising. It's just not to the same area as like a Price at this moment. When I look at his profile analytically, he wasn't necessarily like, if you look at his time and, he played with Seth McGowan at one point and, so like there's some teammate stuff going on, but he never was like a true bell cow in college, right? Never like, is that a projection thing that people are having a hard time with? Because he has the size, he has the speed, the receiving profile isn't that bad. It's not fantastic, but it's at least like good enough. Like his top comp in the Zap model was Latavius Murray. Okay. And I don't think that's a bad thing when you're taking.
No, I don't think it's a bad thing at all.
Median outcome and like being able to be usable. And this is what we're kind of working with this running back class too. Now, Jadarian Price, his top comp was Ronald Jones, just so that people are aware of that. Yeah. So like, which I think is actually kind of interesting because Jones had very similar red flag call outs of like having to project a little bit from a receiving perspective. And with Price, you're talking about the pass pro stuff. Like, so I have two questions I want to ask you. Do you think Mike Washington ends up rising via the regular draft people to a point where like it seems like you think there's a possibility that Mike Washington's the RB2 drafted in this class. And then with the other piece with Jadarian Price, can you if he gets the draft capital, I'm not worried about the rushing production because draft capital generally is indicative of that side. And that's relatively replaceable. Yes, you're going to get the extremes, but it's a more replaceable aspect from a player perspective in the NFL. But my thing with Price is, can we project that receiving side? Like, is that where your hesitation lies? Like, because I think that sometimes with Price, where people are viewing him almost from a real NFL lens and not a fantasy lens.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to chew on there. Do I have concerns about Jadarian Price's receiving role and production? Yes, I have a lot of concerns because if he can't get the pass pro stuff down, then the glaring holes on his production profile and the lack of receiving work becomes even worse because he's not going to play passing downs.
Yeah.
And then if he doesn't get round 2 capital and he gets round 3 capital, but him and Mike Washington both go within like picks, or maybe Washington gets drafted before him in the round, then it's and then we play the landing spot game. So I have a lot of concerns about Jadarian Price and Mike Washington. I don't think he's going to get the hype from the media conglomerate because for a few different reasons, like you just see like with the general NFL draft media consortium, there's certain guys they'll talk about. Some of this is helmet scouting. Some of this is collegiate program and all that kind of stuff. And the other thing about it is not many people were expecting Mike, like he wasn't talked about because again,
there's no hype train. Yeah.
Well, the thing is the narrative around this running back class, we've already kind of talked about it, JJ, is that it's horrible. Yeah. So if the narrative around this class was this class is really good or it's solid, then I think you would see maybe more people gravitate to it because the echo chamber is not going to like smack it down. So some of this is just straight vibes. What I will say is I think Mike Washington could get drafted higher than what anybody is going to kind of talk about because of what he did at the combine, because of the size, because of there is a lot to like in his profile to where he doesn't get the hype in the process. But when the NFL draft and the picks are flying, I think that he could go higher than people are expecting. And that's the point where everybody goes, oh, okay. Well, I didn't see that coming. And he went before Jadarian Price, where everybody's like, blown out of their chairs, and where it's like some of us are like, oh, okay, should have kind of seen that maybe.
Yeah. Right now, the model actually does have Price RB2, and it's pretty draft capital driven and teammate score driven and stuff like that. But I've said all along, like from the start, I just have a hard time like being overly confident in a guy like Price in his profile. But two guys that the Zap model seems to like a good bit versus consensus. I stress versus consensus because I don't think they're flawless, but Emmett Johnson and Nick Singleton are two that are popping a lot in the model. Talk about both of them, because I'm very curious about where you stand.
I like Emmett Johnson a lot, man. I just worry about where his draft capital goes. And I feel like because of how I wasn't surprised, and I'll be very clear about this. I wasn't shocked about how he tested at all. I actually, where a lot of people like, oh, hell, he got a 4.
Wasn't it expected?
Yeah, like I expected that from the very beginning.
If you watch, because when I'm writing these profiles, by the way, Emmett Johnson's actually the RB2 in the model. I forgot that, but when I'm writing these profiles and stuff, I'm watching on one monitor just so that I'm not sounding like a moron whenever I talk about them. I didn't see like crazy long speed with Emmett Johnson.
No, he doesn't have that. So I was hoping that he ran a 4.5. The fact that he ran a 4.4 wasn't shocking. If anything, I was happy about that because that's not where Emmett Johnson wins. That's not his secret sauce. Like, okay, fine. We can ding him for the 3 cone and stuff like that. I'm like, and that's dragging down his RAS score.
But he's the only one who did that.
Exactly. And he shouldn't have done it. Like the other thing about it is like, we talk about all these guys are not running and testing and stuff like that. His agent should have like tapped him on the shoulder and said, okay, you're sitting this out because we know your time isn't good.
There's a clear bias. I am wondering though, and I heard Dane Brugler kind of talk about this at one point, and obviously Dane is very, very tapped into what's going on with the league and, one of the best, if not the best out there. But Dane was mentioning that there are some teams out there that actually give players a little bit more love when they do go out and test because it shows that they got that dog. Right. Yeah. And so that's great from now he didn't test. He was like, what, a 25th percentile 3-cone guy or something like that. Like it wasn't very strong.
But the rest of the stuff was fine.
Right. And then, but like the interesting thing that Dane brought up was that like Mekhi Lemon sits there at the podium and says he's got this, he's got all this dog in him and that he'll compete against anyone. And then he doesn't go out and compete in all of the drills. And it's like, how do you kind of match what they're saying versus what they're doing? So I want to at least give Emmett Johnson credit for doing it and for doing when literally no other running back did. He was the only one who did it. And so for us to knock him on that seems a little bit unfair. But
it is.
What kind of like comps are you seeing with Emmett Johnson? Like what kind of running back do you think he can be at the next level?
So also to your point, just before we move off of this, I do want to throw it out there that yes, fine. The 3-cone is crushing his RAS score. He also in the vert and broad was a 71st and 73rd percentile athlete. So it's not like he's a total schlub. And my comp for Emmett Johnson throughout the entirety of this process, I've thrown it out there. I haven't given it out on social media because I know people are going to take this and run with it.
This is the play. This is a safe
and be
play.
ridiculous. That's why I'm sharing it here. That's why this is a safe space because I know we can have this conversation and get through this. You look at the play style of Emmett Johnson. His short area burst, his lateral agility is where he wins. This dude in the second level, I mean, I wrote it up in my rookie profile for him. His infectious energy on a per touch basis. It's like this dude shotgun like 8 monsters and packed in like cheeked like 4 Zens before he takes every carry or gets every touch. Like, and I want to be very mindful of how I present this. I want people to not remember what this player turned into, but I want people to remember his story and his line of like how his career progressed from being a UDFA, the archetype of player that this is. He wasn't somebody that tested as an otherworldly athlete. He was a UDFA. He had to climb the depth chart. Now, yes, he eventually became a freaking fantastic RB1 in fantasy and he was awesome. from a play style and skill set perspective, because I think Emmett Johnson is really a pass game weapon, man. Like we talked about this previously. You do not see, and that's one of the things before we get into Nick Singleton that I think that people kind of miss the boat on Singleton, is that Nick Singleton's not a true pass game weapon. You did not see him deployed at Penn State on wheel routes, angle routes in the slot. Like Emmett Johnson in his final year in college lined up out wider in the slot on 18% of his freaking snaps.
Right.
So I'm burying the lead very heavy here. Dude, as a prospect and as a play style comp, he's Austin Eckler to me. He's undersized. He's a pass game weapon. You look at all those. And again, going back to it, how did Austin Eckler enter the NFL? As a UDFA, he had to climb the depth chart continually to get to the point of where he was. But as a play style guy, like that's who he is. And now because of the testing, because of the draft capital, is it going to make it harder for Emmett Johnson to be that guy? Yeah, sure it is. So if he turns out to be that type of player, he's going to have to Bucky Irving his way up a depth chart, or Austin Eckler his way up an NFL depth chart, and just continually outplay guys. Now, is that more of a projection, and is that more risky? Absolutely. Especially if he drops in the NFL draft. But does he have the talent, and is it there for him to do so? Yes, I adamantly agree. I'm like, that's where I'm at on him. But what are your thoughts on him?
The three comps that came out in the Zap model that are in the prospect guide are Michael Carter, Kenneth Gainwell, and James White.
Okay.
So you get three very usable. I mean, look, Michael Carter's had the career that he's had, but I like, people forget that he was not looked at unfavorably coming out, and he had decent early career production, et cetera, et cetera. You know, Gainwell has been an underrated player. You know, he had the season he had last year. Then obviously in the right spot, James White dominated in fantasy. Like, he was a great pass catcher. And so I am a sucker for this archetype, because I also think in this archetype of Emmett Johnson is Aaron Jones. Like, I think that is in this kind of like, and I loved Aaron Jones as a prospect. That's around the time that I started prospecting. And I always tell this story, but I was one of his like OG followers on Twitter. He followed me back. And so anytime that I say not anything, or there's like a negative stat about Aaron Jones, and someone in the past has tagged him in the tweet being like, look at this hater. And Aaron Jones I'm like, dude, you know, I'm not a hater. He's like, I know you're not a hater, because I've been around, you know, the Aaron Jones train for a while. And by the way, congrats to him on sticking around in Minnesota. But I think that is now, unfortunately, part of this archetype is like Tyler Bidet, right? Yes. Like that kind of player as well. But I think he's going to be able to at least find a spot on a team and play a role on a team, Emmett Johnson. And how you grow from there could easily just be determined by both scheme, coaching, and then him just growing and developing as a player, right? And how much he wants it, if you will. The model loves Emmett Johnson, and the model is very receiving focused. So it's not surprising that he is beloved. But you mentioned Nick Singleton. I'm very curious about your thoughts there, because he's a hard one analytically to nail down, because he obviously broke his foot at the Senior Bowl and then doesn't test. We don't know, like, we saw his weight, but you know, we didn't get to see the athleticism. I think he would have tested really well if he were healthy. Agreed. So I'm curious where you're at with Singleton overall.
I mean, he's a former Feldman freak lister, so I agree with you. I think that he would have tested very, very well. But my problem with Singleton is you see a lot of these guys where the testing doesn't actually translate to the field.
Yeah. All the time.
I think to a lesser extent, this is an Adam Randall conversation where people are going to love him. And I'm like, oh, okay, sure. Have fun with that.
Randall, and for the Randall stuff is really weird to me, to your point. Like, the profile, like, you can look at the other guys who have come out and you know, whether you want to look at Jerick McKinnon type, who ended up going to running back, or like Tyrone Tracy, obviously recently switching from receiver to running back. But like, the profiles were there for them. The production profile is not there for Adam Randall. It's like, it's really, really tough. Anyway, I didn't mean to hide.
No, you're good. And just for, you know, for my 2 cents, Randall is somebody like my comp for him is Jalen Samuels. Like, I just look at him as a tween.
Yeah, I'm
totally out. No.
I wrote about that in his actual write up. That like, we've seen the J Sam type come out. I'm looking over at my prospect guide right now, which is why I'm looking to the left. But his top comp from mine was the three for Adam Randall are Carlos Williams, Kalen Ballage, and Quadri Olison. Hail to Pitt. Yeah.
It's not a pretty list, man. It's not a pretty list.
But like, for instance, like Brashard Smith, right, comes out last year.
Yeah.
He had really good production and had like a skill set that we could see translate. And obviously it hasn't happened and probably won't happen. But like, that's a different kind of player than Adam Rand. Adam Randall is just this beefy, massive dude who really didn't show us much. But I want to talk about Singleton because Singleton is.
But I think in the same, we're talking about this, and I kind of went off on the Randall side was because I'm getting back to like, it's a player that where I don't think the athleticism translates to the field consistently, because if you look at him on an analytics perspective, and I think this honestly shows up on his film as well, where Nick Singleton to me feels like he's my Quinshon Judkins of this class, where last year a lot of people were high on Judkins and I was very much not high on Judkins at all, because I was like, the analytics and the tackle breaking stuff didn't line up with what I saw from a hype perspective, and you know, the production was there, but same thing with Singleton. Like, it's difficult for me, JJ, like to get excited about a player where I do the film eval, I'm not loving it, and then I go marry it to the production profile, but I'm like, dude, like, so we're going to be hyped about a player that over the last 3 years in yards after contact per attempt amongst all FBS running backs with at least 100 carries, he ranked 152nd, 56th, and 125th. And from an elusive rating standpoint, he was 132nd, 117th, and 150th. Like, what about, and then not even talking about his breakaway run rates? Like, what on paper outside of like, okay, he's going to test good, but it doesn't translate to tackle breaking metrics, which also correlate to production, and tackle breaking is one of the things that like it does translate, like where it's like guys that maybe didn't test as otherworldly athletes, the Tyler Algiers, Bucky Irvings of previous years, where the tackle breaking metrics were really, really good. And we're like, oh, okay, well, we kind of question the athletic profiles, and then they get to the NFL and it's like, oh no, they're actually still good at that skill that they had in college. Yeah. With Singleton, it's like, I feel like we're doing kind of like the Rashad White thing, where it's like, he's super athletic, but he's not efficient at all. And there's holes on the profile, but like, we're just going to glaze over all of that.
You know, you're saying all this, and one of his comps in the guide is CJ Procise. And that's
my comp for him. That is my exact comp for him. I'm not even kidding.
Yeah, that scares me. I mean, like, the model objectively likes him. Okay. So I probably don't have as strong of a stance as you do on Singleton, but I do think that there are like, his three comps are Ajayi, Buck Allen, and CJ Procise. So like, it's a lot of not amazing, you know, comps and situations. But like, when you look at the size and the raw receiving numbers and stuff, and you put in the stuff that like the ZAB model, you know, the inputs of the ZAB model, generally players of that archetype will outperform more than underperform. With that being said, I do think, you know, from what you're saying and what the comps are saying, there's a lot of volatility to the profiling.
I think it's absolutely hilarious because you and I have very similar but very, very different prospecting processes and stuff. So when we get this merriment, because we didn't talk about any of this pre-show, so to come down with the exact same comp on him, I think is
not only that, but a very
random. Precise, like we're pulling this out of the freaking ether.
Yeah,
dude.
like CJ Procise is a very, very like out there comp.
3 years dollar store David Johnson. That's what we're talking about here. You know, like big and athletic, but just never happened.
I'm Daniel Jeremiah.
And I'm Greg Rosenthal.
And this is 40s and Free Agents.
The games may be over, but the NFL never stops. This is my favorite part of the calendar.
Yeah, mine too, Greg. Free agency, the combine, the NFL draft, pro days, trades. This is where teams reshape their future.
This is where Daniel Jeremiah makes his money. On 40s and Free Agents, we break down every move that actually matters.
From my draft evaluations, mock drafts, and team fits,
to my top 101 free agents and how real rosters are built, cap space, contracts, and all the tough decisions included.
You got quarterbacks on the move.
We got teams rebuilding. It's hope season.
Yeah, absolutely. It's hope season. We'll tell you what's real, what's noise, and what it means for your favorite team.
Smart analysis, real conversations every week.
I don't know about the smart, but definitely analysis. Listen to 40s and Free Agents on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
There's a one back who got a David Johnson comp. This is all analytical. The comps, they're based on size, speed, production. was Seth McGowan out of this class.
Oh,
he was the David John. And I thought if anyone would kind of be, maybe it would lean more of a Washington just because DJ was so like freakish, right? But Seth McGowan had like a good combine, and he's older, and there's all this, and there's just weird. I'm not saying I'm just saying that like it was interesting that he at least had like one good outcome out of his many not great comps that were out there, because his age, he's old, like he's an older prospect.
I'm so curious because my comp for him, and this is play style, but also size, athleticism. I'm so curious if he falls, if the model came down with this. He's my Isaiah Pacheco of this class, Seth McGowan.
Oh, really?
Like, he runs like him. He tested similar, like, there's a lot of play style stuff with that where, he's my Isaiah Pacheco of this class.
I don't have a Pacheco comp for anyone. I was actually just searching to make sure I didn't have the one Journey. There was a Journey comparable for Kyle Monangai was Pacheco, which is funny because they're both Rutgers guys. I had for Seth McGowan, it's Dwayne Washington, David Johnson, and Keontae Ingram. So it's like literally just, there's this random spiked, like crazy good athlete that translated for a few years. But generally speaking, it's rougher comps. I mean, he's old. Like it's tough
he's old.
to buy. He had some of that like off the field stuff too.
Off field stuff.
Yeah. So it was just a different kind of player. All right, let's move on to wide receiver. You have Cardinal Tate right now as the clear wide receiver 1. Mm-hmm. Tell me why you feel so strongly. Why do you love Cardinal Tate?
I think he's the most complete wide receiver prospect in this whole freaking class, man. I love him. I think that there's people are going to try to knock him. I don't freaking care about his 40 time. We've done this, and people are. It's an idiotic thing to even bring up. Like, he's not fast enough. There's actually negative correlations to 40 time and wide receiver production if people want to go down that road. But Cardinal Tate, I love his skill set, man. The analytics match up. Like, fine, we can go to the counting stats and all that kind of crap, but like, he was 10th in yards per route run. He's honestly the best route runner of this class. He can threaten a defense at all 3 levels. He has the ability, like, he has that my ball mentality. Like, the dude, you post a freaking 68.8% contested catch rate.
Yeah.
Like that, crazy. As well as like, he doesn't drop the ball. He gives you verticality, but I think he has the most complete skill set out of all of these guys because, again, going back to, I don't have any concerns about him getting slot confined. I don't have any concerns about his verticality and his ability to win downfield. And while on paper he's not an amazing yak player, you see it in his film and stuff. Like, he can produce yak. He can break some tackles, although that's not also the way that he wins. I went old school with my comp, JJ, and this is like going to yesteryear, so a lot of people are going to have to go pull up some YouTube clips on this player. But
we're unk, yeah,
we definitely are. I don't have my New Balances on right now, but I can pull them out. I went Keenan McCardell for my.
Oh wow, that is unk. Yeah,
I went really old school because I've seen a lot of the stuff with like George Pickens and I'm like. He does analytically match up to a Pickens type. He does. And style, I mean, as far as size, but play style.
Right. I got you.
He's different than that. Like, he does have some problems with press coverage where he lets guys into his body and it can affect it, but it's not a consistent thing. And the play strength is there to where I'm not concerned about that. Like, so I didn't go with Pickens because I think him and Pickens are also very different players.
Yeah. What about Calvin Ridley? That's the second one in the.
That's a good one. No, I kind of wrestled with Calvin Ridley, but then it's like I went back to it and I'm like, I think from a route running perspective and that type of prowess, Ridley is very apt about how polished they are as players. I do think that Tate has more verticality and more juice. And a little more physicality to his game than Ridley did when he came out. Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about Jordan Tyson because the Zap model just loves Tyson. His age adjusted production is ridiculous. That one season, the third season that he had was so good. And so people are aware, like, we've seen the spike seasons of like a JSN or Luther Burden did it his sophomore year. And it happened junior year for Jordan Tyson. Partially or largely because the injury, obviously, but like he's a younger prospect. So I'm age adjusting everything. And so technically that junior season looks more to the model, more like a sophomore season, which is why his breakout score, by the way, if you look at top 100 wide receivers since 2011, breakout score itself correlates to their production in their first 3 years almost just as well as draft capital does. So there's a very strong correlation of breakout score being predictive of first 3 year production. And Jordan Tyson has the best by far breakout score in this class. So the model naturally just really likes Jordan Tyson. But I understand there's obvious concerns about durability. Is that your biggest concern with him, or are there more play style concerns that you have?
It's honestly not the durability stuff, because I just think when we talk about the durability stuff, like especially the knee injury specifically, hasn't he already proved concept that he's back from that? So like
he literally came back and dominated after that injury.
Exactly. So like why are we going to knock him because he had the knee injury like freaking 3 or 4 years ago? To me. That's in the rear view, and I don't care. We could talk about length of his career if we want to go down that road about it. But like for me, it's like I'm not worried about the knee injury because he's already come back in the NFL field and proven that like the knee is not a problem. So that's been an issue with, because like if you read again, I have a lot of respect for the people, especially like I think of all of the like buckets of NFL content, like you're looking at NFL draft, you're looking at like regular season stuff, whatever the case may be. I think that NFL draft personalities in the big media landscape are the sharpest of all of those people. Like whether you're talking like DJ or Brugler or whoever, like I think they're the sharpest people from like a football standpoint than what you get on regular, TV during the regular season of the NFL. Oh, agreed. Yeah.
Like they're good at what they're doing. And so I don't say this to like dig at any of those people, but I do find it interesting that when you look at mock drafts and you see that Jordan Tyson is like, 25th overall or something like that in some of these, or like 20th overall. And it's like the blurbs or something along the lines of like, he has the whole package, but durability is the only concern. And I'm like, if durability is the only concern, then we should be drafting him a lot higher than 25th overall. I
emphatically agree.
But if you see more than the durability, I want to hear that. I want to hear what that part is.
Yeah, so for me with Tyson, and the reason why like I don't have him as my wide receiver 2 right now in this class, you can make a case for him, and depends on draft capital and landing spot and things like that. The concerns that I have on Tyson of, yes, like the early production is there, the per route production is there. It's when I marry some of this back to the film, it's like when I look at his game versus other players, his ceiling, he could be the wide receiver 1 of this class. When we look back at this class 2 to 3 years from now, he could be the clear wide receiver 1 if he hits his ceiling. My worry about Jordan Tyson is that, and again, splitting hairs between wide receiver 2 through 5 of this class, is he's not an amazing YAC player. He only had 5.1 yards on the catch per reception in college. His per route production is really good. It's not elite. Like 2.71 yards per route run is really good. If not like, it's very good.
Yeah.
But it's also not an elite number. It's not like blow you out of your freaking chair type of number. He had only 13 missed tackles across his last 2 seasons.
He has one of the worst tackle breaking numbers that I've seen ever in the database. Yeah.
And going back to like previous classes, this was kind of where I was. And obviously this is hindsight, but like where we went back to the class of Malik Neighbors versus Marvin Harrison Jr. And I didn't have Marvin Harrison Jr. as my wide receiver 1 in that class. It was Malik Neighbors, and it was handling Malik Neighbors. And my concerns about Harrison Jr. at that time were he wasn't an elite YAC player. And the other thing about Tyson, just getting into his film real fast, is his ability and fluidity with changing directions and at the snap at the top of his stem is just otherworldly. There are some route running spots where he needs to clean up, where the route salesmanship has to get better. He has some TikTok footwork, whether it's release packages off the line or at the top of his stem, where there is wasted motion. Now, is there improvement there from 24 to 25? Yes. But is there enough improvement where, again, I was poking holes in certain players' games where, like last year, everybody was treating Travis Hunter like he was this otherworldly, like God mode wide receiver prospect. And I was like, he's not that, dude. Like the film doesn't line up with that. And Tyson, I have some of the worries where it's some of the route running, it's some of the refinement and the growth that still needs to happen in that area. And can he live on the vertical plane, because he doesn't stack corners, routinely. You don't see that wasn't how he was utilized. So can he be a 3-level threat where it's like looking at him versus a Carnell Tate? I don't have any worries about that from a route running perspective or a skill strength perspective. And his play strength shows up in route and the ability to deal with physical corners, but he's not a ball winner at the catch point. Like, and I think that like that play strength where it shows up in some areas of his game, but it doesn't show up in others is a concern because it doesn't show up in yak. It doesn't show up after the catch and doesn't show up when he's dealing with muddy catch points and he has to be a ball winner. It doesn't show up there consistently.
Yeah. It's great analysis. And for the record, his comps are a lot more difficult analytically than some, like right now in the model, he has CeeDee Lamb, Marvin Harrison Jr. and Corey Davis as his 3. But
volatility.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Which is why, like, again, I approach fantasy from a very much, and I'm open about this, very much a ceiling perspective. That changed a lot from, like 2012 to 2016 when I was doing analysis. I've been much more of a ceiling type player.
Same.
And to me, Tyson, like, just analytically has that for sure. But I do think that some of the stuff you're bringing up is very valid, even when you look under the hood and see some of the players that also were as bad as he was. Now, look, from a missed tackles force perspective, Chris Olave, Devontae Smith, they were both poor there, and they've translated, but how, like, we haven't seen the insane ceiling from them, right? Like they've been in, like I think they're both extremely good wide receivers, but I'm talking from a fantasy perspective. And then you also have like Jalen Reagor, Jahan Dotson, and some scary players that were drafted in the first round that have those marks. So yeah, it's good to hear the other side of the Jordan Tyson argument. Let's talk about Mekhi Lemon. We talked about him a little bit earlier. You have slot concerns about him. Like, do you think that because like his perimeter yards per route run is actually the best in the class? Like, which is crazy when, you put this puzzle together with Mekhi Lemon, but do you watch him and you're afraid of landing spot dictating a lot, a la Amon-Ra St. Brown, where who knows if Amon-Ra St. Brown does what he does if he doesn't land in Detroit?
Dude, and people have framed it like whenever I've brought it when I've had this discussion on the FantasyPros NFL Draft Show, the YouTube comments just like they're like, "Oh, you're a Mekhi Lemon hater," and again, it's like people want absolutes with all this stuff, and it's not like you can't talk the range of outcomes with stuff where it's like I have concerns about Mekhi Lemon, and again, like we talked about, like entering this version of the NFL where I don't think that he's Amon-Ra St. Brown. I don't. Like when I look at, and again, we go back to like, you can look at this stuff like based off of his profile too, JJ. Like, does he have the yards per route run? Absolutely. Does he have the early career production? Absolutely. Can we also talk about it? Like he's looked at as like this otherworldly yak god, over the last 2 years, 60th and 28th in yak per reception. Okay, that's solid. It's good. It's not otherworldly amazing. And you stack that up against the tape, and his tape in 2024 and 2025 was very, very different to me. I have gotten it through the grapevine. He did put on a little bit of weight, now whether in the weight room and what have you, from 24 to 25, but it shows up in his film where I thought he was a more explosive player in 24, more twitchy and things through his routes, top of his stem, after the catch, all that. Where in 25, I didn't see that. And then when you put him out on the perimeter, and yes, the analytics are good there, but like on the film, he's not as a refined route runner on the perimeter. He plays like a lot of like the vertical, especially the vertical element to his game is worrisome for me because he's not a great separator on the perimeter, and all the bells and whistles that you look at for route runners to win on the perimeter consistently, especially because that's the difference between him and Amon-Ra St. Brown to me, is that Amon-Ra is more of a technician as a route runner, and that's how he wins on the outside, where he can stack corners. He is a better route runner. I didn't see that from Lemon. Lemon is a guy that plays almost like, when he gets on the perimeter, he plays like he thinks he's T. Higgins, where a lot of this is back shoulders winning at the catch point. And it's like, can he win that way? Possibly. But again, you go back to the size of him. At his size, that is asking a lot more out of him to win in that exact same manner in the NFL, to where that's where I can't get to the Amon-Ra St. Brown comparisons for him, and where my comp for him is, and people are going to hate it, but rewind to production in the NFL and in fantasy. I look at him, and my comp for him is Jarvis Landry. And if he turns out to be Jarvis Landry for fantasy,
it'd be great.
That can't be a bad thing. How is that a bad thing? But people are going to look at that and say, that's a horrible thing. But Jarvis Landry, the same kind of concerns were, as a slot confined player, he was amazing in the beginning of his career. When he went to Cleveland, they asked him to play inside outside. It wasn't the same, JJ.
Yeah. I'll read his 3 comps. The top one is actually pretty rough. Really rough. It's Nelson Aguilar is his top comp.
Okay. And again, a slot, like a player that was his best in the slot. And he had, honestly, I could say Aguilar was a better downfield player than he was.
And then OBJ is the second one. And then Jaden Reed is the third one. So you get the slot only as the third one.
So your comps are spitting out that there is more volatility than I think anybody's willing to talk about, where everybody, if you get out on social media, it's like, if you don't have Mekhi Lemon as your wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2, or he's not top 3 in this class, and right now in my early ranks, he's not top 3 wide receiver for me, then people are like, oh, you're a clown. Oh, it's terrible. Just throw it all out. You know, it's like, no, man, like, I think there's volatility. I think that there, to me, I think there's probably more volatility to his Now, I will say, as I dug into it analytically more and more, I was like, man, this is actually looking better and better, just because of like the perimeter stuff, etc. But I do think that archetype wise has more volatility than what you're going to get from Tyson and Carnell Tate, from a projection standpoint. Just because I see it more as a landing spot dependent type situation than what I would get from the other two. I don't want to jump us too far ahead here, but I think that there's a really interesting conversation that is not being had right now.
Bring it.
I think you're looking at similar archetypes, but I think you have way more proof of concept with Omar Cooper being a more versatile wide receiver than Mekhi Lemon. If you look at both of these guys and the way that they're discussed, and you look at the roles that they played in college, Omar Cooper basically played the Mekhi Lemon role in 2025, and he did it at the same level. If not, you can make a really good case that he did it at a better level. Like, he forced more missed tackles. Yeah. But the other thing at Omar Cooper's bag that you don't have with Mekhi Lemon is he's a better route runner, and he has in his bag 2 years of playing strictly as a perimeter wide receiver in college, and Lemon never had that. And he was similarly productive, like yards per route run and other metrics, where he was good as a perimeter wide receiver. And it's like, I don't have those concerns about Omar Cooper playing on the outside and being versatile. So it's like, I'm not putting the Amon-Ra St. Brown comp on Omar Cooper. But if we want to talk about the parallels of a slot player that can play the outside and stuff, you have more proof of concept of Omar Cooper doing that and being closer to Amon-Ra St. Brown in this class than Mekhi Lemon is.
Yeah. So do you think Cooper deserves to be a first round pick? Like in the real NFL draft?
I do. Now, I don't have a first round grade on him. I have a high second.
Yeah.
Only because I think he is a very, very strong prospect. But again, I don't see like elite where, like, in my mind's eye, can I envision where he is a wide receiver 1 in an NFL offense, and an NFL offense runs their passing game through him. I don't see that in his range of outcomes. So it's hard for me to put a round 1 grade on a player like that. So I think he's fringy. Now, you know, if you were to tell me he gets drafted in round 1, and again, if he goes into a similar, depending on landing spots, and say him and Lemon both get drafted in round 1, and then we play the landing spot game, and now we have similar draft capital, when it's all said and done, I might have Cooper ranked over Lemon.
Casey Concepcion, he's slipping a little bit on NFL mock draft database. I mean, I say a little bit, but like since mid-February, he's dropped like 4 or 5 spots, which isn't nothing when you're talking about first round capital. Where are you at with him?
I freaking love him. He is right now in my early ranks. Again, this is going to shift post NFL draft. He's my wide receiver 2 of this class, JJ. And again, like, I'm not just trying to spit hot takes here, but like, I think he is a fantastic prospect. And I know that a lot of like a lot of the metrics and the counting stats and the production and stuff like that is going to line up well for him because of,
to be fair, and this is one of the things that I have kind of gotten annoyed by with the haters, the numbers driven haters that are out there that are like, no one can like Casey Concepcion if you're doing this through numbers. False. Very false. Because he's doing it, like, go look at his you can just go to College Football Reference and he's immediately producing. When he was at NC State, immediate production. When you get that age adjusted production, that is a huge signal. The model loves Casey Concepcion.
I love him, man. I just look at his game, both from a film and the analytics perspective. Like, when you talk about a wide receiver that had a 12.2 ADOT last year, and yet, JJ, he still was 26th in yak per reception. Like, you don't see it when guys are used also down the field and they're still producing yak and after the catch. And then when you factor in, Marcel Reed is not a good quarterback. Like, he's just not. And so we could play that game with a lot of different wide receivers and collegiate production and lining up film versus production and, and a lot of those different things. But KC, he has the ability to be like, if an NFL team drafts him and they say, we want to put him outside and he's going to be a 70% perimeter wide receiver. Again, going back to this, a guy that to begin his collegiate profile was 82 to 92% in the slot. And then his final season in college goes and plays perimeter 65%. And it lines up with the film, JJ.
Yeah.
He can play on the outside. He has the route running chops. He can produce yak.
Yes.
He plays bigger than his size. Like we talked about, okay, do these guys play it up at the catch point? Can they be ball winners? Can they bring down tough catches? And some of that translate to ceiling and floor, because that also gives you the ability to be a red zone weapon and be a player that can get to not where you're living in a Devontae Smith, a Chris Olave type of phylum of like 4 to maybe 8 touchdowns is your run out, and that's capping your ceiling, because can you ever get into double digit touchdowns and be a top 12, top 15 wide receiver? I love Casey, man. I think his game is incredibly well rounded. I feel like he's getting slept on to a certain amount in this process and just overshadowed because people look at the size and it's like, what's the problem with the size?
He was 196.
190.
He was 196 in the combine. Yeah.
And that's where it comes back. My comp for him, because of the versatility and all these different types of things, he's Ladd McConkey to me.
Yeah, he's a very interesting prospect. I'm in on him. One guy that I know you're higher than me on, and I want to hear the reasoning and the logic behind it, is Denzel Boston. To me, like from an analytical perspective, checks a lot of frightening boxes. Now, comp wise, it's Jaden Higgins, Cortland Sutton, Mike Williams, so it could be worse. Okay, that's not terrible, but there's a lot of red flag type stuff from a production standpoint, breakout score standpoint. Now, I know he played at Washington when they had the big 3 wide receivers there. Yes. But also another like low key storyline out of that group was that they had Jeremy Bernard there too. And Jeremy Bernard actually outperformed Denzel Boston. Now 2 totally different wide receivers. So like it could just be like a deployment, archetype type thing. But I thought that was kind of interesting that Jeremy Bernard was better than Boston from a production standpoint in that one season that they played together with those guys. But tell me about Denzel Boston and why I should be higher on him.
Well, and I think you're alluding to, all the stuff with when he gets really hairy about early career production in college and this NIL world we're living in and teammates and things like that, where it's easy to see in your mind's eye of like how the early production didn't happen because of all the talented wide receivers that they had there. And my thing about Boston is, this last season, 47th in yards per route run. He was 5th in contested catch rate amongst all FBS wide receivers, at least 10 contested targets. And it's funny, again, we fall in the same exact type of comp here. My comp for him is Cortland Sutton.
Yeah.
I think you're looking at Denzel Boston, and he is a ready-made high-end wide receiver 2, can operate as a low-end wide receiver 1 in an NFL offense. The thing about Boston that I absolutely love is he's such a refined wide receiver. And we're talking about skills that translate to the NFL, and we see this with so many different players, is not only is his route running fantastic, but he has all the bells and whistles. He's a catch point winner, and his body control is absolutely ridiculous, JJ. And we see this like how many different guys, and I think Puka Nacua is the easy guy we could pull out of, just the stratosphere. And I'm not putting that on him, but like body control at the catch point and the ability to adjust to errant throws. His quarterback play in college was not great.
I would argue no one's been better than that. We talked about him earlier. Mike Evans is a player who's great at that.
Yes. Yeah. And Boston, I just look at, and that's why, like, when we're splitting hairs of who these players are and who they come down to be, like, I look at the profile, and from a film perspective, I look at Boston as a cleaner prospect than somebody like a Jordan Tyson, where it's like Denzel Boston, I feel like we know what we're kind of getting with this type of player from a play style and from a skill set standpoint, where it's like Tyson, I see more of a range of outcomes about who he is currently and who he could grow into be in the NFL. Is the ceiling higher? Yes, the ceiling is higher with Jordan Tyson. Absolutely. But can I say the floor is immensely higher and the ceiling might not be that far away considering his landing spot and similar draft capital for Denzel Boston, where Boston and Tyson are not in the same conversation for a lot of people. And I understand that. For me, they are, because I could see their runouts in the NFL being very, very similar, if not Boston's the cleaner prospect. And I feel like I have a better idea of what we can get from a fantasy perspective and the NFL is getting from a player like Boston.
All right. We talked about a lot of wide receivers. I'm just going to leave this open-ended here. Any wide receiver that we haven't talked about that you're eyeing right now that you think maybe not getting enough love?
Can I give you two here?
Yeah.
Ted Hurst and Bryce Lance. I love both of these guys. Yeah. They tested extremely well. Ted Hurst isn't going to pop for a number of reasons, whether you want to talk about going to Georgia State. Yeah. A number of his analytics aren't amazing. The film is fantastic for Ted Hurst. I don't know why he didn't go to a bigger collegiate program. I don't know why he didn't transfer. I don't know why he didn't get recruited, all that kind of stuff. But I love his film. There's a few different things, like you can dive into his profile and be very encouraged by the fact of, like, amongst all FBS and FCS wide receivers, he was 24th in missed tackles last year. He also leaves college with a 61.1% contested catch rate. So as a player that I think he probably goes round 3, round 4 of the NFL draft. If he would have gone to a bigger school, then he would have better draft capital. It's just the nature of it.
He got so he's smaller than this player, because like when I'm running comps, it's algorithmically, and it'll spit out a bunch of comps, and it's looking at the distance for certain metrics and stuff whenever it's doing those comps. So like size is getting a lot of weight, but it's not everything. And so whenever I say this comp, this is a number 3 one, so it's not like the main one. When I say this comp though, it's not like from a build standpoint, it's not totally 1-to-1, but Nico Collins was one of them for Ted Hurst. Which,
dude, that's the fever dream of what he could become.
Right. He's smaller though. He's smaller.
But see, the thing on his film is he plays bigger than his size too. That's good. Again, like where a player, like, you see the physicality show up in his routes and at the catch point.
The thing, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're good.
The thing to note though with Nico is that he was not a complete prospect coming out. Like that's the thing that I think is really important, is that like when you see some of these comps, you're like, wow, that's a real, but like some of these guys weren't like for instance, Omar Cooper, one of his comps is Rashee Rice, right? Actually, it's his top comp. But Rashee Rice analytically wasn't flawless, right? We're just seeing him in this space and within this place that he landed. And, he obviously has hit in the NFL. So like whenever we talk comps like that, I think that's important for me to throw out there, is that like Nico is a comp for Ted Hurst, but that doesn't mean that the model, the model was kind of neutral with Nico, but it doesn't mean that the model was like, Nico was going to do this, right? Because we can't project that.
Well, can we also, going back to a previous conversation, and if anybody's been doing prospecting long enough, you could also say that Nico Collins was the original Alec Pierce as a player that came out, and he was incredibly athletic. Right. But none of that athleticism translated to his game because he had so many areas of growth that he needed to achieve as a player. And then you saw the player that he grew into. That's basically what the Colts are trying to do with Alec Pierce. Like they're trying, like this is the Nico Collins type of like,
that's a good point.
Model or career trajectory all over. And yes, we could see that again for Ted Hurst, but
yeah,
I love Ted Hurst and Bryce Lance. Again, it's a small school guy. He tested amazing. I just look at Bryce Lance as this is Christian Watson 2.0, and I'm not going to this isn't helmet scouting. But if you look at skill set, size, speed, all these types of things, and the nuances of his game, I couldn't come away with any other type of comp for Bryce Lance, who he's a ridiculous athlete. And again, I like to put these players up against their peers in the FBS. And if you stack him up against all FBS and FCS wide receivers, at least 50 targets last year, he was 8th in yards per reception and 6th in yards per route run. So to me, when I go back to it, and it's the same thing I did with Christian Watson, it's like, okay, fine. If he's coming out of a ridiculously small school, what do we want to see out of this guy? Okay, you want to see him look like he's superhuman and just absolutely moss everybody. And that's what Lance did at North Dakota State. Yeah,
is there a reason why he had such a late breakout? Like because he didn't do anything.
Not that I found. Yeah, not that I found.
That to me is the analytical red flag. Is that yes, when he got starter reps, he dominated. I mean, he's also what 6'3", 204, but he's or something along those lines. Like one of his comps for like he got like MVS type players, but then Kenny Golladay was one also, which another smaller school guy who ended up being relatively productive in the NFL. But yeah, it's a weird profile because rarely do you see the highs that he hit while seeing almost nothing to start his collegiate career. That's why it just makes it a tough read overall.
Yeah, it's tough, man. And that's where, and I think his draft capital, both in the NFL and in Dynasty, there's going to be a wide range, I think draft capital is also going to tell something. Again, he's in that Ted Hurst kind of Chris Brazzell.
Yeah. Do you think Lance could find himself on day 2?
I do. Yeah. I think he goes in round 3. I absolutely do. And I think he should go in round 3. And I think the fact that, again, the NFL double counting speed, this is a player they should double count in the sense of put more respect on his name. Don't let him fall to round 3, 4, or 5, like draft him in round 3.
All right. We talked about a lot of stuff. So before I let you go here, I know we even had other stuff that we could have talked about.
Dude, we could be here for another hour at least.
Easily
could be.
But we have families and lives and etc. So before I let you go, I love the hot takes at the end of every show. So give me a hot take for this year's NFL draft.
When it's all said and done, and we look back at this class in 3 years, I think Cole Payton is the runaway QB2, and he's right on the heels of Fernando Mendoza.
Wow.
In fantasy circles and what have you. And if Cole Payton would have gone to a big school, I think that the draft, or if we would have been living in yesteryear of the NFL draft consortium, where Josh Allen went in round 1, Trey Lance went in round 1, Carson Wentz came out of a small program and went in round 1. And Cole Payton's not getting any of that type of love. Now, his draft capital could be it's variable. Like there's been some hype that some teams have round 2 grades on him. I think if I was an NFL GM, I would have no issues taking him in round 3 of the NFL draft. If somebody just falls in love with him, they want to take him in round 2. I get it. But he's going to need some luck and some run out and the ability to start and prove it. But I love the skill set, man. I mean, he has the rushing upside, and the fact that it kind of gets lost in the sauce is their gimmicky stuff with the North Dakota State offense, where they used a lot of RPO, they used a lot of boot action. He didn't have full field reads. Is he a see it throw at quarterback? Absolutely. The other thing about Cole freaking Payton, dude, the arm talent that is on film is it's salivating, JJ. Like he has a massive arm. He has the touch, the ball placement. He can rip 40-yard out, like deep outs. Like it's not just thread the needle, man. And he's got the rushing upside to boot, man. So like, I feel like if we were living in the NFL draft community of 10 years ago or what have you, this is a guy that maybe would be talked about in a very, very different light. But because of he's coming out of the small school, because he has only the 1 year of starting experience, although people talk about it, but they have no problem putting first and second round capital on Ty Simpson. Yeah. Same thing. I just think Cole Payton's not getting enough love. And I think we could be living in a world where he turns out to be basically the Jalen Hurts of this class, where he ends up earning a starting job, gets a starting job, and he keeps the starting job.
Sounds like the perfect last round pick in a Superflex rookie draft.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Love it, man. I appreciate the time. Obviously, this is a long one. We had a lot to cover. I think people will dig it. Let everyone know where they can find you, what you're working on, all that good stuff.
Yeah, all the social media is Debro_FFB. All my work is at Fantasy Pros right now. I'm still diving through all the prospect write-ups before the sounder goes off for the first round of the NFL draft. I think I've done this the last 3 years in a row. I will have my top 100 out, so that'll be 100 skill players all written up for Dynasty Rookie and all that kind of stuff. Rankings will be out, and you can find all of my rookie takes and stuff, both at Fantasy Pros, obviously, but we've since launched 2 brand new YouTube channels that we're trying to get the word out on. Both the Fantasy Pros Dynasty channel and the Tailgate, which is nothing, no fantasy, nothing at all. If you just want straight up NFL general content, we're talking ball, we're just talking NFL stuff, head to the Tailgate.
Sweet. Yeah. And I definitely encourage people to check out your work because like you said, our processes are totally different, but I think that's really, really important when you're, getting analysis from different people who are looking at the draft stuff and prospecting, just to get your own, create your own narrative for these guys. Cause you should have fun doing this. You shouldn't just blindly follow people just because. I mean, I know that some people are, but if you're listening to this show and you've made it 2 hours, that means that you're a diehard and you're a sicko. So, go listen to everybody's work. You can find my stuff obviously over on lateround.com. Prospect guide will be out on Sunday night for you guys. It's pretty much done. It's very, very close. I'm excited for that. So definitely check that out, lateround.com. Otherwise, everyone have a great weekend. And as always, thanks for tuning in.
I'm Daniel Jeremiah.
And I am Greg Rosenthal.
I know that, Greg. We're teaming up on 40s and Free Agents, the podcast that owns the NFL offseason.
This is where teams are built. Free agency, the combine, pro days, trades. Every move matters.
From my draft boards and mock drafts
to my vaunted top 101 free agents and how rosters come together.
Quarterback movement,
surprise signings.
We'll tell you what it means and who really wins. Open your free iHeartRadio app, search 40s and Free Agents, and listen now.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.